Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Tyrell. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback. So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, Tyrell. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, Tyrell. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. Hi, go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. Hi, Tyrell.
Can you hear me?
I can, but we're getting getting a lot of the feedback.
Haresh, can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. I'll go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. That's all right.
Haresh, can you hear me?
Can, but we're getting a lot of the feedback.
Haresh, can you hear me now?
So I think we'll have to lower the sound on the speakers at the boardroom. I'll go again. My apologies. I got disconnected for a second. That's all right.
Just, I don't know, we just didn't get anywhere.
I can't hear anything. Is anyone talking?
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can start with our session. My name is Vuyiswa Kaluza, the chairperson of Commonwealth Women Parliamentarian KZN branch, and I will be chairing the session for today. We want to start. It's already 12:30, and our program, as indicated, that it starts at 12:30. What we do not want is to inconvenience other speakers, so we want to stick to time. Without further ado, we would like to call upon our pastor to just open the session in a form of prayer. Pastor wethu, Pastor B.S. Ntleko, who is going to also be joining us virtually. Ma'am Ntleko, we are handing the program over to you in a short prayer session. Thank you very much.
Hello,
Ma'am,
do you hear me?
we can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Angibingelele emini egameni lenkosi yethu Jesu Kristu. Ngibingelela bonke ubuholi nje obukhona around. Kafushane sizofunda incwadi yama-Judges. Ama-Judges sizofunda uJudges chapter 9, verse 54. Or sizoqala verse 51. But there was a strong tower in the city, and all the people of the city, men and women, fled to it, shut themselves in, and went to the roof of the tower. And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman cast an upper millstone down upon Abimelech's head and broke his skull. But a certain woman cast an upper millstone down upon Abimelech's head and broke his skull. Let us pray. Baba wethu ongcwele, sisondela kuwe mini, uNkulunkulu onamandla onke. Sisondela kuwe wena osazi kangcono kunabo bonke abantu abakhona emhlabeni. Kwaba sentandweni yakho ukuthi umenze umuntu kube nowesilisa nowesifazane. Izwe lakithi lihlangabezana nobunzima kulamalanga. Ubuhlungu kakhulu esikubonayo nesikuzwayo. Sisondela kuwe uNkulunkulu wethu ongcwele. Ngelinye ilanga Abimeleki esehlasele abantu babalekela embhoshongweni, ababaleke maqede bazivalela phakathi. uAbimeleki wagijima, uAbimeleki wayobabulalela khona, kodwa kwaba khona owesifazane othile. Baba wethu ongcwele, sithi namhlanje vusa abesifazane abathile abangangeni ey'nqabeni abakuzo, emsebenzini abakuyo, emshadweni abakuyo, kuma-leadership abakuwo. Baba ongcwele, bangene nje ngegama, kodwa bangene bephethe into okuzothi uma isimo sishuba, uma isimo simelena nathi njengoba simelene nathi, babe nayo imbokodo abazoyidedela ekhanda lika-Abimeleki maqede inqotshwe impi. Baba wethu ongcwele, sikhulekela labo basifazane abathile, Baba, abazoba nomoya wakho, abazothi uma bengena kuma-leadership bangene benazo izinto abayiphethe esandleni okuyizwi lakhe linamandla. Siyabukhulekela ubuholi bethu bonke, sikhulekela izwe lakithi uNkulunkulu ongcwele. Kuphelile imisebenzi kubantwana bethu, kubayeni bethu, kuphelile imisebenzi kubantu abaningi. Iy'nqaba zethu Nkosi zishisiwe, iy'nqaba zethu zibhidlikile, iy'nqaba zethu Nkosi azisathembakali. Siyakhuleka egameni likaJesu nakulesi sikhathi ukuba kube khona abesifazane abathile. Baba wethu ongcwele, lo wesifazane uno name, kodwa kukhona umsebenzi omkhulu awenza. Wakwazi ukuthi khona into ephathwayo uma umuntu ebhekene nempi. Izwi lakho lithi, izwi lakho lingumbhoshongo onamandla lapha abalungileyo bagijimela khona balondeke. Sizolondeka kuwe Nkulunkulu. Hola lolu hlelo lonke egameni lenkosi yethu Jesu Kristu. Amen. Thank you very much.
Amen, Mama. Siyabonga kakhulu ngomkhuleko osinikeze wona. Siyathobeka ngokukhulu ukuthi siqhubeke nohlelo lwethu ngaphandle nje kokuthi sizosibingelela officially. Sizocela ukuthi sidlale i-Women's Anthem esizoyithola ngomucu esizowufaka on this virtual platform. Colleagues, can we then play the Women's Anthem?
All across the nations, all around the world, women are longing to be free, no longer in the shadows, forced to stay behind, but side by side in true equality. So sing a song for women everywhere. Let it ring around the world and never, never cease. So sing a song for women everywhere. Equality, development, and peace. We can decide when all around the world people hurt and hungry children cry. We'll sing out loud for justice and development and hold the rights of other people high. So sing a song for women everywhere. Let it ring around the world and never, never cease. So sing a song for women everywhere. Equality, development, and peace. Women now are working to build a better world where the love of peace can rest on every shore. Where men lay down their weapons and learn to love and share, and people work to bring an end to war. So sing a song for women everywhere. Let it ring around the world and never, never cease. So sing a song for women everywhere. Equality, development, and peace. So sing a song for women everywhere. Let it ring around the world and never, never cease. So sing a song for women everywhere. Equality, development, and peace.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will then continue with our program. We would like to extend our sincere greeting to all members of the KZN Legislature, all invited guests, all our panelists that are still going to be formally introduced, all stakeholders that are part of the program, those who are joining us in all various parts of the networks and various social media platforms. We extend our sincere greetings. Sibingelele ngokukhulu ukuzithoba Mama Mfundisi uPastor Nhleko, who opened the session with prayer. Siyatobeka kakhulu. All officials of the KZN Legislature, we sincerely greet you, colleagues. We will then call upon the Honorable Member Umama Usiku Madlopa, who is the chairperson of the KZN Multi-Party Women's Caucus and also the chairperson of the Premier Portfolio Committee in the Legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, to then give us welcoming remarks as well as formally introducing the guests that we have in our session today, before we can then give the purpose of this program today. Mama Usiku Mgunomhle, we hand over to you, leadership.
Program Director, Deputy Chief Whip of our Legislature, Udadewethu Uvuyiswa Caluza. Good day to everyone present to this important occasion and historic one. My name is Celiwe Madlopa. I am so excited to see all of you together here today. A big thank you goes to each and every one of you for joining this platform to discuss critical topics affecting women of our country. A warm hearty welcome to our dear phenomenal women from different sectors of our society and those that are individual platforms. Program Director, allow me, Mgunomuhle, to extend our special welcome to our distinguished guests and friends of the legislature, many of whom have worked hard to prepare for this webinar. The topic of this webinar is, I quote, the year of Charlotte Manyamatleke, realizing women's rights. This topic that is going to be discussed today is high on the agenda of the KwaZulu-Natal Legislature. Although it is said that despite some progress in our country, but the fight for gender equality continue to be ignored in various corners of our societies. Still in 2021, the demands penned down by women in 1954 in Women's Charter even today remain as demands. I hope this program will be great and successful. Program Director, allow me to welcome all the honorable members of the legislature led by our leader, Honorable Speaker Ann Boyce. I want to welcome our distinguished guests, starting with our main speaker or the guest speaker, which is here to grace our occasion, the Speaker of the National Assembly and former President of the ANC Women's League, Honorable Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngagula. We are saying, as the KwaZulu-Natal Legislature, congratulations on your new appointment, Mama Wetu. We wish you all the best and we know that you are a hard worker. Also, I want to welcome the campus vice principal, academic and research, Professor Pearl Sithole, who is part of our panelists today from the University of Free State. Honorable Director, allow me also to introduce the Republic of South Africa Deputy Public Protector, Ms. Koleka Gcaleka, and also the author of the book, namely Leading Like a Woman, Udadewethu uMiss Fundini Nzimande. Student activist, Ms. Sarah Mokwebo, and we have different sectors that are present here today that are going to share with us the platform today. Once again, thank you. You are all friends and family of KwaZulu-Natal Legislature. A warm welcome. We want to take this opportunity also to thank all those that have joined this platform, and we are saying to them, in the name of the legislature, under our leadership, the young leader who is dynamic, who is also trying her best to put this issue of gender inequality high on the agenda of the legislature. We are saying as legislature, a warm, hearty welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mama UCQ, for those welcoming remarks. And we will then request our speakers that are going to be sharing the platform with us to kindly open their videos so that everyone that is watching can be able to then follow and actually see them. Colleagues, we will then continue with the program. Briefly, we would like to indicate that as the legislature of KwaZulu-Natal through the CWP, we have called this webinar to share experiences as women, but also to learn from each other. As a country, which is South Africa, we dedicate the month of August to celebrating women, not only the women who marched to the Union buildings in 1956, but equally those who continue to champion the interest of women across the globe. We must, however, share our pain, as it has now become a norm that when we celebrate the month of women, a number of incidents happen where women are brutally killed and assaulted. We share our pain when we remember the incidents that just recently happened where a young girl, Noscelo Mtebeni, a Forte law student, whose body was found chopped and discarded in a plastic bag, allegedly by someone she knew. We equally remember Ndivuo Mnyai from Limpopo, who was allegedly equally shot by her husband. Also during this Women's Month, we remember Usindisiwe Mnguni, who was equally shot in Midrand. We've also recently learned of the brutal killing of Sergeant Nonjabulo Mkale in Tembisa. And also just closer to home, a mother and a daughter hacked to death in Umzumbe, KwaXolokolo. The question that we continuously ask ourselves, ukuthi senzeni na? Ladies and gentlemen, as the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarian KZN branch, whose aim is to embark on learning activities and cooperate with regards to inter-legislative exchanges in the Republic of South Africa and beyond, as well as to promote knowledge on the constitutional, legislative, economic, and social and cultural aspects of parliamentary democracy. And guided by this, we have organized this webinar with an aim to impact knowledge as well as to learn from one another. The government having declared the year 2021 as the year of Mama Charlotte Manye Maxeke, we are equally guided by her principles of selflessness. Mama Charlotte Maxeke didn't keep the knowledge she had acquired only to herself, but she continued to advocate education for Africans. And today we have outstanding women across generational lines who have agreed to share a platform with the hope that whatever they share with us will leave us better than we were yesterday. And for this, we are truly grateful. We are hoping that the session is going to ensure that we learn from experiences as women, but not just women, but all gender sectors across the province of KwaZulu-Natal. We are hoping that this webinar is going to change how we look at gender struggles, especially women's struggles in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and beyond. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, we on the program do have the Honorable CWP Chairperson from the International Chapter, who is Umama Chandana Khan, but unfortunately we've just received an indication that she is currently held up in a meeting and will be joining us as soon as her meeting ends. So we will then continue with the program as it was and take the Honorable Speaker of the Legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, Umama Unontembeko Waka Boys, who will then be who is next in line in terms of the program. Umama Unothemba Boys, as we all know, is not just an ordinary young woman. I say young because she is not old by age. She is young at heart as well. She is a seasoned gender activist, champion of the working class and the poor. Born in Flagstaff in the Eastern Cape, Umama Boys became politically conscious at a very early age, and she participated in the student politics during the 1990s. In 1996, she came to work in the south coast of KwaZulu-Natal as the teacher. She possesses a senior primary teacher's diploma and a BTech in education management from TUT, advanced certificates in leadership and postgraduate diploma from WITS. She's currently registered for a master's social science with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She has served in various positions of the branch of the South African Democratic Teachers Union in the Lower South Coast, known as Uku District. She also served as the regional secretary of the Union of SADC in the Lower South Coast region, which is now called the Mbuso Shabalala region. She serves in various structures of the mass democratic movement, including the regional chairperson of the ANC Women's League and the Young Communist League of South Africa, as well as the ANC Women's League at in the Regional Executive Committee in the Lower South Coast. She's currently serving as a member of the African National Congress Provincial Executive Committee, as well as the Women's League in KwaZulu-Natal. She has served as the councillor in Uku District Municipality, whilst also working as KZN Legislature Caucus Manager. In 2014, she was sworn in as a member of the KZN Legislature and deployed as the Deputy Chief Whip of the ANC in the legislature. In 2016, she was deployed as the Chief Whip in the legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, and during the 5th legislature term, she has represented the legislature in various international delegations, including the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Africa Region meeting in Nigeria, as well as the Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference in Bangladesh. They were both held in 2017. Following the 2019 general elections, Umama Boys was elected as a Speaker of the KZN Legislature and serving as in the National Speakers Forum Core Business Reference Group. She also led the KZN Legislature delegation to the CPA Africa Regional Meeting in Zanzibar, as well as the CPC that was held in Uganda. As we said, she is just no ordinary woman. We welcome you, Somlomo, Wishamthetho KwaZulu-Natal, and we hand over to take the platform. As we know, all speakers have 15 minutes, and we are handing over to you, Somlomo, Nothemba Waka Boys. Thank you very much.
Honorable Deputy Chief Whip, who's the chairperson of our branch of CWP, Honorable Taluza, my chairperson in the Women's Caucus, Honorable Maldopa, the Speaker of the National Assembly that is with us, the Honorable Mapisa Ngakula, Somlomo Mama, the Leader of Government Business, who's also the MEC for Provincial Treasury, MEC Dube Ncube, the leadership of CPA and CWP, CPA headquarters, amongst others, are represented by James Pennell and his team, my colleagues, provincial speakers, the Speaker of Free State and the Deputy Speaker of Free State, and any other colleagues that may be with us, the fellow panelists, Deputy Public Protector, Advocate Talega, Ms. Nzimande, Professor Sitole, Ms. Mukwebo, our guests, greetings. How could I forget the most important person who made this possible also? The Secretary of the Legislature of KwaZulu-Natal, Ms. Nerusha Naidu, and the entire administration of KwaZulu-Natal, the shoulders that we always stand tall on. Honorable Chairperson, I have been requested to speak on how patriarchy adversely impacts us as women in parliament and the public life or office. I felt that I should start back by identifying that patriarchy has been over the years a hindrance to development and progress. It has been defined in multiple ways by different scholars, but it always have the same meaning, which is a system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded. This exclusion of women is manifested through multiple ways, which may, though not limited, include established practices and customs that are systematic and structural. Patriarchy drives gender inequality and women bias. It can be acceded to and assisted by women to continue institutionalizing itself. Honorable members, over the generations that it has been practiced, patriarchy has always had an adverse impact on women's prosperity and the general progress in life. So since we are gathered here today to celebrate the close of the Women's Month in the year of Charlotte Maxeke in a Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians platform, I chose to speak about both parliament and public life effects of patriarchy within the Commonwealth family. This is because since the founding of the CWP in 1989, there have always existed a vision of improving the conditions and participation of women in parliament and public office. This then means that it has been noted and established that there was a hindrance to the participation of women in parliament and public life. The establishment of CWP, therefore, was also to respond to a call for better women representation in all parliaments, and more so to the association member parliaments. And that call has been made by advocates for women representations and NGOs over a long time. This meant that there was a consensus across the association on that lack of women in parliament and in public office had to be dealt with and means be put in place to fight that what was hindering the progress. The CWP had an objective that was made with a call of having at least a minimum of 30% women representation across all parliaments and legislatures of member countries and provinces in our case. Across the Commonwealth, thus including South Africa, women make up the majority of active political participants and voters, yet they are in minority inside parliaments. For instance, if we were to look into the current voters' role of the IEC, you will find that women make around 55.23%. In the 2019 general elections, of the 66% voter turnout, women alone accounted for 55%. And yet, in the National Assembly, women stood at around 45.7%. That is out of the 400 members of the National Assembly that were sworn in post the 2019 elections. But also closer to home, our own province, KwaZulu-Natal, post the 2019 elections, we were standing at 42.5% of women. Yet, even in KwaZulu-Natal, women are in majority. But this is not limited to us here in South Africa. Within the CPA, the case remains the same, and we will continue to use 2019 and in 2019, there was still less representation of women. But of course, Africa fared better because in the top 10 countries of the CPA, at least Africa appears more than the rest of the associations from other regions. For instance, Rwanda is currently first and was first even in 2019, both in the CPA and in the world. While South Africa is standing fourth in the CPA, Namibia is standing third, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Uganda occupy 6th, 7th, and 8th position respectively. The reason that I'm choosing to use the 2019, this is because this was the last general poll we had at South Africa. And the last time that we could see how much women were able to be put into parliaments post the election. Understanding that we are working on a minimum of 30%, it is interesting to note that in our region, not all countries have even reached that 30%. Beyond those that appear in the top 10, I know that we have Cameroon, which also comes in being at the top 10. And as South Africa, we still have many of our legislatures, including national parliament, having moved beyond the 30%. This means that women across the world and the association still continue to face barriers to participation in politics as a whole. Because also in local government, figures reflect more men, including the occupation of key positions in local government, mayors, deputy mayors, speaker, and chief whip. In most instances where you see improvements in local government would be on positions of deputy mayor. But in the public office at the level of legislature, which includes government, we can still see that women are not really as that represented. But in South Africa, following the 2019 elections, it was decided that all executives must at least have a 50-50 representation. And that then meant that at least there would be more women in the positions that are leading in government. So that is the case in South Africa, but of course, in only those provinces that are led by the current governing party in the country. Further to that, there has been a resolution or move to ensure that all provincial legislatures and the National Assembly speakers are women. This improved the ascendance of women to positions of power within the parliament, which has always been predominantly male-dominated, owing to the system and customs that are being used in our own politics. This is beyond the fact that the majority of women are participating in politics. Many members of political parties are women. So if we are to change this, participation in politics needs more than the representation of parties, but it also needs to be biased to the representation of women. We understand that participation in politics needs more than the will and ability to serve the people, but also needs participation in the mainstream politics. And this is where patriarchy is most at play. Women are not occupying key positions in political parties, even in those few in our country that do have women occupying political positions. They still have more men making it to the list to represent those parties in parliaments, legislature, and as well as in government. So what should be the cause of this? And I think that, honorable members and guests, we must look at what causes this and have more understanding that we have to deal with the cause. For instance, a campaign for election into political office needs financial resources, which most women still cannot access. This is because the levers of our economy are still dominated by men, and 150 years after the birth of Mama Charlotte Maxeke, a woman of many firsts, we are still also celebrating a first Black woman in most areas of our life, especially in the economy. So the women that are participating in politics already have a disadvantage in terms of resources. Members of CWP and women politicians in general should hold hands together and fight for women to have more opportunities to represent their parties through provisioning of self-empowerment programs. This should include us as women parliamentarians, ensuring women in our constituencies and political formations are participating in all political activities, including amendment of laws that are aimed at speeding up the full gender emancipation. There are certain bills or laws that we should also concentrate that protect women. Amongst those, including the hate crimes bill, which is still to be processed. This is because if we are to deal with a system that favors the physically stronger, we must protect the vulnerable. In this instance, in the politics and the political space, women are vulnerable. A system that protects the physically stronger is patriarchy. But it does not only protect them, it further isolates, dominates, and excludes women and make them feel vulnerable when they participate in the political space. So our participation in the amendment of laws must not only be concentrated on laws that might be popular in my area, but it must also be concentrated on laws that are aimed to bring social justice. We are all aware that in the South African context, there has been a case of individuals that have reached the Constitutional Court, where following the Constitutional Court judgment, for the individual standing for national and provincial elections being allowed, the electoral laws are up for amendment. And this offers an opportunity for women to organize and input for change that will reflect a stride towards attainment of gender equality in political corridors and levers of power eventually. I say this knowing full well that representativity and quotas have their pitfalls. Like the fact that most elite women stand more chances than ordinary women. But we must understand that the general participation of women in politics is a positive, and that positive far outweighs the negatives mentioned earlier. This needs brave women politicians to face their male counterparts, just like Monica McWilliams of the Northern Ireland Women's Coalition once advised during the CPA studies on gender, that we need to be brave to attain our objectives in politics. I quote her. She had this to say: whilst acting out of fear is natural, acting from hope is brave. Close quotes. This meant that brave women who are able to stand against male superiority in their parties should also be pinning their hopes not only on women, but also on progressive men who understand that consensus in politics is not only reached through compromise, but also needs surrender of your current position of advantage. Men that are advantaged by patriarchy should also move progressively to surrender those unearned advantages. But importantly, those brave women need the support of many of us as women. When we support them, their hopes will not be in vain. Also, also, if the women who are already in power do not use their only available advantages, which are bravery and forging unity, we cannot end some of the effects of patriarchy, which includes underrepresentativity in parliaments, the economic exclusion of women, the fact that women leaders are being judged on different standards. You find that whilst there are adopted standards of how to operate, but when it comes to women leaders, there would be differentiated standards based on morality of others, not being the same standards that are used for men. But also the unfavorable working conditions that take place in politics and parliaments need also to be dealt with, because it is also an effect of patriarchy. Our parliaments must move with times in making it conducive for members that are still parenting to be able to be available parents to their children while also doing their work efficiently. This will go a long way to encourage young women to participate in politics, stand for election, and also be able to service their communities when they come to the legislature or parliaments. As I conclude, Chairperson and guests, I want to emphasize that we need to collectively form formidable partnerships and expose patriarchy when we see it, either covertly or overtly. Sometimes patriarchy is done in a very covert manner, as if it is a support to women, as if a fellow woman is being put forth, but also undermining the general principles that when we are speaking about women representativity, we are not speaking about women that have a proximity to men, but we are speaking about women that will be also be responsible, accountable, but also be able to discharge the responsibilities that they would be given. For this to happen, we need to continue breaking the barriers. The fight is never over. It has only just begun. We must utilize our spaces to put women where they belong, at the forefront of change. When we're doing this, we will also be making effect of the call by Umama Charlotte Maxeke, when she said, I quote, "If you were to rise, bring one with you. Don't live above your people." We want to call then for us as women parliamentarians to not live above those that we represent, but to live with them. When an opportunity to empower, we empower more women, especially the younger generations, so that when we are gone, there are many women that will take over the baton. Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you so much, Mamu Boys. We truly appreciate your presentation, and of course, you know, the matters that have been raised are an indication that as women we still have a long way to go, and obviously the gender struggle continues. Ladies and gentlemen, we just want to remind you that you can comment on our social media pages, especially those who have not linked via Teams. And we will, when it comes to questions and discussions, be able to take questions from those platforms. We are live on the Twitter page, which is at KZN Legislature, as well as Facebook page, which is KZN Legislature. So when you are commenting on those pages, we are able to then see from there, and we will take the comments that are raised in those platforms as well. As we had indicated, that the international chairperson of CWP was held up in a meeting. She has since joined us. We will now cross live to the Honorable Chandana Khan, who is the chairperson of Commonwealth Women Parliamentarian International. She's also a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan, a legal professional with extensive knowledge and experience in international trade, economic law, and policy. She has written on Pakistan's first IP framework, e-commerce policy, and GI law. Also, beside having served as a parliamentary secretary for commerce and industry, Honorable Chandana chairs the subcommittee on agricultural products, focusing on women farmers, workers, as well as the youth. She's also she heads the parliamentary task force on SDG 5 and is helping develop Pakistani's first SDG roadmap. Part of that work is focusing on quick results for girl-child marriage restraint legislation. She's also serving in the Committee on Industry and Production, Privatization and Planning and Development. It is indeed an honor to have you, Chairperson, and we are truly honored that you are able to then be part of this webinar. We now hand over to you, Chairperson Khan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair, all members present. I'm incredibly grateful, and good afternoon. I don't know what time it is in different parts of the world right now, but thank you so much for inviting me to this event. Both me in my personal capacity as a member of the Parliament of Pakistan, as well as chair of the Commonwealth Women Parliamentarians International, I truly feel honored that in the time of the pandemic, KwaZulu-Natal is taking charge, and they are conducting this particular program at a time when things couldn't be more difficult for women. Surprisingly, when we were formulating the Sustainable Development Goals, at that time we thought that the world had learned enough from the failure of the Millennium Development Goals, and we were going towards an easier world where we could easily implement Sustainable Development Goal number 5, which is women and girls in empowerment. Nobody had planned for a pandemic. Now that we're in the thick of it, I think this particular event could not be more timely. I know I'm allotted 15 minutes, but I will try to take even shorter than that and be available for question and answers if need be. I'm also grateful to the Honourable Speaker for extending this invitation to me for this noble event in the memory of a very strong woman. Honourable colleagues, honourable friends, honourable members of Parliament. I prepared a sort of speech to discuss today, in particular with reference to the work the CWP does, but I'm going to change it a little bit simply in light of what I've heard so far, a very interesting discussion on the patriarchy. As a first-time parliamentarian, as a woman parliamentarian, as one of the few people who are under the age of 50 to get elected to Parliament, I have some interesting and diverse views to share, because my experience of the patriarchy has been disturbing, to say the least. I have experienced the patriarchy, as we call it, not just from the men. You know, as we say, the perceived enemy or the open enemy. I have perceived and experienced and lived through the patriarchy even through our older colleagues. Twice, thrice elected female parliamentarians who have till today refused to accept me as one of their own, as a colleague, as a contemporary. And perhaps that's been the most shocking lesson to me, that the patriarchy is not about men. It is also about women. Women who are steeped in traditions, what they call tradition, and what we refer to as the patriarchy. By way of example, and I'm sure it's similar all across the globe, that at least in India, in Pakistan, in Nepal, in Bangladesh, parts of the Commonwealth, where women are a part of the ruling patriarchy. For instance, nearly 10 years ago, The Economist wrote an article on how the rising Indian middle class was threatened by the funny figure of the mother-in-law, who usually is the patriarch and the matriarch of the house, who usually outlives the husband. And in India, a diabolical trend was seen where, due to interference of the mother-in-law, young couples, middle class, upper middle and lower middle income were getting divorced. Due to that divorce, the 350 million strong population of India, which figures in their giant economic boom, was getting impacted. Divorce was not only impacting the figure of the family, the unit of the family, it was also impacting the Indian economy. And so legislation, which is now defunct, was hastily drafted, not passed through Parliament, to ensure that there were power equations in the House that would adequately reflect the kind of society that India wanted to become. What I'm trying to say is the following. The patriarchy impacts us in many ways. The patriarchy has invisible friends and helpers, and they're not all male colleagues. They're not only men. They're not only our brothers, fathers, husbands, our workers, our colleagues. It's the entire structure of society that has to be broken. Kerala, a province in India, has done it. And how did they do that? Through the matriarchy. It is the only province in all of India that has achieved universal literacy, like Sri Lanka, also a matriarchal society. Now, to say we should reject the baby with the bathwater is not something I would advocate. What I would advocate is what I have so far already in a number of discussions. And I did this last week, 2 weeks ago, when I was in Zambia at a different event organized by the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of the Western Cape, Honorable Beverly Schaefer, and Honorable Speaker of the Western Cape Province. I discussed the issue of the UN Women Program, which is called At He for She, Male Champions of Gender Equality. Unless we get the men in our parliament, the men in our society, the men in our workplace, the men at home to decide that enough is enough and women have suffered enough. And as a result of women suffering, their children have suffered enough. You all may know the shadow pandemic. In the wake of the pandemic, the COVID that has shaken the world, what has shaken the world even further, and not many people would like to talk about it because it's embarrassing, it's shameful, is this violence that has taken place. A 300% rise in global gender-based violence, which interestingly ends up being visited upon children. Women, girls, grandmothers, sisters, parliamentarians, officers, policewomen. Anybody who experiences abuse at the hands either of the husband, intimate partner, or male relation has then gone on to visit it on younger member of the family, children and older aging adults in the home. And I've also discussed this in my previous meeting that we don't realize the implications of the patriarchy. $16 trillion is kept off the table every year due to the gender pay gap. And this has been estimated by the World Economic Forum. We as women need to do something about it. If you will recall, at my election that took place in Kampala in 2019, I stressed one thing in my election manifesto because I've truly seen it, I've believed it, and I've witnessed it in my own country. Until and unless women are enabled to be economically independent and strong, no other emancipation will help them come out of physical violence, gender pay gap, lack of hospitalization, the problems of maternal deaths, high rate in my country. It's all connected. And we keep on looking for causes and reasons. You wonder why rich women also get beaten up. We wonder why rich women are not happy. Why rich women are not empowered as we would like them to be. It's because when you don't have a voice at the negotiating table, when you're not important at the decision-making table, women will never count. And this across the globe. Look at the differences in two of the richest countries in the world, United States and Japan. 1 out of 2 women is killed by their intimate partner or abused by them. Surely they're rich. Surely they have their legislation in place. They have their women help centers. They have their commercial centers. But why haven't women made it so far? Because we women are the ultimate cradle of a family unit. There will always be a woman required to create a family, whether she's a working woman, whether she's a parliamentarian, whether she's a teacher, whether she's a doctor or a nurse. So I would request all of you today, if our aim is to defeat the patriarchy, then it's an unending war. But if our aim is to make the patriarchy see the sense, show them the dollar figures, show them violence figures, show them the job figures, show them the world figures on despondence, things will change. To this end, I'd like to thank my team here at the CWP in London, our new Secretary General, Stephen Twigg, a former Member of Parliament from the UK, Jarvis Mattia, our Deputy Secretary General, James Pinnell, he's the head of the program for CWP, Benit, who is a lovely young lady, and I don't know if she's in the room today, Aksa, my own team in Pakistan. I'd like to thank them because in the 2 years that we have not been able to travel during the COVID, and usually one of the perks of the CWP is that people get to meet people from other regions. I had planned on visiting online regions in my 3-year stint and haven't been able to do so. What we have done, which was a godsend to us, and I must say God's wisdom prevails in everything over else, in not being able to travel, perhaps we've achieved more. What are the 3 things we've done? Number 1, we adopted the borrowed anti-harassment policy that was given to us by the APF, this sister of CWP, the Francophone equivalent of CWP. We have sent that policy to all 180 legislatures, and all of you colleagues, I request you today, if you have not received a copy, let us know, and we'll be sending out a fresh copy to all your legislations. And we request you to adopt that policy. It is not legislation. It is easy to do. It will be reflected in all the contracts you make for all the women that have been hired by KwaZulu-Natal legislature. Secondly, we have created a gender sensitization program modules for parliamentarians, whether men or women. That is how we defeat the patriarchy, by educating them. As if they don't know what they're supposed to do. But we have to reinforce that message. We need to keep on talking. And I'm happy to arrange one for KwaZulu-Natal province with my team who is sitting here. And thirdly, we have also made nearly 7 videos with the ASU, the Julianne Wrigley Institute in University of Arizona State. And those are videos for your parliament to be shown to your male parliamentarians on climate change, on women and gender, on women and laws, women in power, women in leadership. So I leave it at that. I'm incredibly grateful for this invitation. I'm here to take any questions if you have any. Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. Thank you for the entire admin team of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you for remembering me on this important day. And I assure you of any and all support I can extend. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, Chairperson of CWP International, Ms. Chandana Khan. We are truly honored and privileged to have you on our platform. And indeed, the struggle against patriarchy remains a never-ending war, at least until such time that we are confident that patriarchy has been defeated. So we really would like to appreciate your presence in this platform. And obviously, when the time for questions arises, and they are, we will then also call upon you to then respond. Without further ado, on our the next speaker, as we had indicated that we have speakers across generations, we now have a very young, beautiful Sarah Mkwebo, who is a former student activist and a verse business leader, currently awaiting her examination for a master's degree in built environment at the University of Witwatersrand. She holds an undergraduate degree in construction studies as well as an honors in quantity surveying. She is a former student representative council member and an advocate for feminism and social justice. She's the founder of the collective of women initially comprised of students from Wits University called We Should All Be Feminist. And the objective is to develop and create educational and advocacy programs in universities and greater society, which is targeted at informing society about the subjugation of marginalized groups of people. She is also the founder and curator of the book Stokvel, which is a collective of men and women with the objective of promoting writing about and by Africans. The Stokvel brings together readers and writers representing the diversity of African stories through the written word. Sarah Mkwebo is also a member of the ANC Youth League Ekurhuleni RTT, board member of the OR Tambo School of Leadership, a senior facilitator for the Tools of Analysis module offered by the school, which is the OR Tambo School of Leadership, as well as a research associate in the University of Johannesburg. We welcome you, Sisi Sarah Mkwebo. I say Sisi, but you are indeed very young to me. Over to you, Datewetu, Mr. Mkwebo.
Thank you, Program Director. I'd like to start by greeting everyone. Greetings to everyone here today, and thank you as well to those that, excuse me, that have availed themselves and also given us their time to listen to us and my fellow panelists. Thank you very much to the KZN Legislature and more especially to the CWP for having confidence in me and inviting me to form part of today's gathering. I could not believe it when I was told about the lineup, because I didn't think I would be the person that would one day share platform with such remarkable women. So it's both a privilege and an honor. It's both a privilege and an honor, and I hope I will be able to meet the expectations that have been set for me today. I don't know if I have permission to project. I prepared just a very small presentation, which I thought would be able to guide my contributions for today. And please just give me a few seconds to allow my laptop to grant permission as well. I think I should be able to now. It's been granted permission. Okay. Oh, maybe not. I don't know why I'm having challenges with this. No, I'll just continue with my presentation without it. I think my laptop is giving me some challenges. Like I said, my name is Sarah Mukweba, and today I would like to speak on the effects patriarchy has on young women. I'm glad that I was not the first person to speak, because that has allowed those that spoke before me to give definitions of what patriarchy is, so that all of us are on the same page and we all have the same understanding. Although I know that many people that are attending here today are not hearing about patriarchy for the first time. There are people that have heard about it many times, and there's constantly different experiences on a daily that we still need to hear about. So I would like to speak about a lady I met in 2015 during the first wave of Fismas Fall, and her name is Hlengiwe Ndlovu. Now she's called Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu. And for me, I think she is the best person to speak about when I want to talk about how patriarchy affects young women. So Dr. Hlengiwe Ndlovu did her PhD with Wits University, and her PhD was on the responsiveness of the state in villages, and specifically Duncan Village in the Eastern Cape. And the reason she was doing that, I guess, is just to see how the state interacts with people that wouldn't necessarily have the kind of access people in urban areas do that. So Hlengiwe's story starts when she applies to study at Wits University. I think it was 2010. An undergrad, which was a BA, which is a Bachelor of Arts. She gets accepted for a Bachelor of Arts, and then she goes through with the studies. When she gets to her honors year, if I'm not mistaken, she applies for a scholarship, and that scholarship would fund her studies from her honors year all the way to PhD. So she applies, she meets all the prerequisite requirements in terms of academic capabilities, and perhaps also the area of interest that the scholarship wants people to further or to pursue their studies in. Then she goes for an interview. When she goes for an interview, she goes through everything, and she successfully completes all the requirements of the interview, or she meets all the requirements that had been set for the interview. And then when it then came to a time when they had to give a verdict, or a time when they had to give the outcomes of how the interviews went, Hlengiwe is told that she will not be granted the scholarship because she's considered high risk. And when she was told that she is considered high risk, it was because she's a young Black woman. And because she's a young Black woman, they had already predetermined the future for her. They thought that she's considered high risk as a person that would benefit from the scholarship because, according to their own reasoning and their own assumption, Hlengiwe would drop out between her honors year and her PhD years and not complete her studies, and either go on to get married or have a child. And because they've already assumed or sort of predetermined her future for her, they then placed some limitations on her academic success, which is to refuse her funding because they think she's going to have kids. Not that there's anything wrong with having children, but they had already seen her as a high risk. And Hlengiwe's experience is the experience of many young women, whether it's in the workplace or it's in university. And university spaces, for example, are spaces that are considered progressive. However, because of patriarchy, and the thing about patriarchy is that it's very sophisticated. Oftentimes we think it will only come in one form, but it comes in many forms. It even becomes part of the culture of institutions that it operates in. For the fact that, for example, they would want to refuse someone funding because they believe that they are high risk because they're a woman is one of the many ways in which patriarchy manifests itself. So then she's told that no, we're not going to give you the scholarship because we consider you high risk. If she perhaps gave up after being told that, she would have not pursued her studies, and today I would not be calling her Dr. Hlengiwe. She went on to apply for many other scholarships. She went on to take on a whole lot of part-time jobs with the university and also outside of the university in order to earn a livelihood for herself and her family, in order to be able to continue with the studies. She passed her master's with a cum laude, and immediately after completing her master's in 2015 or 2016, if I'm not mistaken, she went on to do her PhD. She graduated for her PhD last year sometime. Oh yes, here's the presentation. I've been assisted on the other end. Thank you. She graduated. I think we can then go to the next page, to the next slide rather, if possible. Are we able to go to the second slide? I think it's Zippo Pagati that is projecting. Okay, while we wait for Zippo to go on to the next slides. So yes, I wanted to title my speech today, The Personal is Political. Going back to Hlengiwe. So Hlengiwe completed her master's with a cum laude, and then she went on to do her PhD immediately. She's been invited in a whole lot of institutions of higher learning across the world between then, when she started with a PhD, I believe 2016, until when she completed her PhD and she graduated last year, December. There's a picture in the next slide as well. May I please have the next slide? The other one again, thank you. Which on this day, it was her graduation day, and I hold it very dear to my heart, because if there's anyone that I would use as a measure of resilience, it's her. Because there's so many women that have been denied opportunities on the basis of their gender. People that don't even know what your future plans are. They don't even know what your capabilities are. But by the virtue of the fact that you're a woman, they're already coming in with a predetermined future for yourself, which robs you of so many opportunities. And this is even not to say that there's something wrong with women that decide to either pause their careers or even drop out, or even completely change their careers in order to have kids and get married. I feel that should not be the kind of stereotype that all young women are locked into. Because in as much as you even become a person that refuses to perhaps follow this predetermined route of your life according to society, you still get shamed and you still get asked a lot of questions about the decisions you decide to take about your life. For example, as Honorable Kaluza was reading out my CV, I studied in the engineering and built environment industry, and many a times I'm always asked about my decision to study such a thing, and I'm always asked, do you want to work on site, sector? Why don't you get an office job? And that is one of just the many ways in which women are constantly buckled down by patriarchy, because patriarchy has this obsession with wanting to police us so much that it even wants to take decision on your behalf in terms of what career you should pursue, what your life choices should be, what academic choices also need to be. So yeah, in essence, today's contribution, or my contribution for today, was just to speak about all our personal experiences as young women or as women are due to the political landscape that we live in. The fact that Hlengiwe would have risked not getting funding for her studies in order for her to be able to pursue her PhD is something that is not an anomaly only to her, but it's something that has happened to so many young women and will continue to happen. And it's something that we need to fight all the time. And this is one of the many things that Fees Must Fall is advocating for, to make our institutions of higher learning very inclusive, outside of the fact that the fees were exorbitant. inclusive in many ways, because even when you look at STEM in our institutions of higher learning, in leadership positions, there's women, yes, but then the women are not black. And we need to start questioning if you are for women leadership, race also needs to be taken into consideration. So yes, there are women in senior leadership, but they are not black. And it's also still quite a shame, for example, institutions that are almost a century old, but they still only now for the first time are having women leaders. Wits University is one such an example. Years old. It was the first time Wits had a woman chancellor. At Wits, we've not yet had a woman vice chancellor, and it probably might take another. At UNISA, for the very first time ever in about 130 years, if I'm not mistaken, they had their first woman vice chancellor last year. The vice chancellor was Dr. Rampele Mampele, and now we have Prof. Hake. So we need to interrogate it in so many ways, which still goes back to my point that I initially said, to say whatever personal experience and how they limit us and how we experience the spaces that we live in, whether it's a political space or an space, it's all informed by the political and hierarchy, which determines how we fare in our lives. And I would just want to also part, which is something that I picked up when doing my studies, that, for example, women are most likely to car accident more than men would. And the reason for that is because women are never affected in any planning that happens. Whether it's for public spaces or it's for the manufacturing of cars, we are never affected in as users of those products that are manufactured. And the reason that women are more likely to die in a car accident is because the dummies that are used are of an anatomy of a male or a man. There are no dummies that are used of women. So therefore, you have no chance to pass away from a car accident. Even if it's a train, as expensive train, you're most likely to get into an accident, or you're most likely to be injured during getting on or off the train as a woman compared to a man, because they do not take into consideration the fact that, for example, a woman might want to get on the train wearing a skirt, and therefore between the platform and the train needs to be able to accommodate that thing. So patriarchy really does do a number on us in so many ways. And I also want the conversation to move away from leadership and have it be about our actual livelihoods, because, like I said, for the fact that I'm most likely to die in a car accident compared to a male counterpart is an indication of everything that is wrong about this world and everything wrong about patriarchy. Without any further ado, I'd like to end my presentation here. And thank you so much, Honorable Kaluza as the program director, as well as Honorable Boyce as the speaker of the legislature, for this opportunity. And I look forward to hearing from more panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dadewethu Sarah. We really do appreciate the presentation, and we sincerely would like to apologize to everyone that is listening. The line wasn't a bit stable, but our technical team has indicated that it was on the line of Ms. Mukwebo. But we were able to then, she was audible. We did get the full presentation, though the line was a bit not stable. So we'd like to apologize for that. And we will indicate that whoever requests the presentation, obviously we'll make them available. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving to the next panelist, Ms. Fundi Nzimande, who has over 34 years experience in leadership. She was also the commissioner in the Commission for Gender Equality with a term that ended in May 2019. She has been part of the Higher Education Transformation Oversight Committee between 2018 and 2020. She has also participated in numerous international conferences and workshops. She is a leader with many strides. She has written articles in policy and on gender, also written on leadership, transformation, international conventions, climate change, participatory budgeting, and tax justice. whilst women leadership and gender equality are her passion, she is an avid advocate for socio-economic justice, racial equality, climate justice, and sustainable development. A reader of a book on leadership and gender illustrates the intersectionality as well. She is a self-published, and her book is titled Leading Like a Woman. She is a passionate educator and a public speaker in the intersectionality of gender. And in 2020, she produced a research report on gender-based violence in domestic work entitled Isolated and Vulnerable, the story of SA's domestic workers and gender-based violence, and developed material as well as taught on feminist economy as part of the pair for Oxfam South Africa. Indeed, we are truly humbled, Sisfundi, by your presence. We did indicate we have women who have really made a mark in the leadership of this country, and we are truly humbled, Sisfundi. Over to you, Ms. Nzimande. You also have 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd just like to say thank you very much for inviting me to this august occasion. I'll start by acknowledging the chairperson of CWP International, Honorable Khan. I would like to acknowledge the Speaker in our National Parliament, Honorable Mapisa Ngakula. I would like to acknowledge the Speaker of KZN Legislature, Honorable Boyce. I would like to acknowledge the Chairperson of the KZN Multi-Party Women's Caucus, Honorable Madlopa, and the Chairperson of CWP KZN, Honorable Kaluza. I would like to acknowledge Advocate Galega, Prof. Sithole, and our student activist, Ms. Mukwebo. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for posting my presentation. Can we move to the next page? I'm not sure if I can. Can we move to the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Thank you very much for inviting me. Of course, I wanted also to talk about the book, but I realized that we don't have enough time. So all I would say about the book is that it has touched on what Honorable Khan spoke about, that patriarchy is not just about men being patriarchal, but because it is so all-pervasive and dominant, we've also find ourselves as women being patriarchal as well. Of course, in the book, I also try to problematize and contextualize women's patriarchy so that we understand how it comes about. And to say that you can find the book on Amazon, on Kindle, on Google Books as well. If you are South African, of course, you can order directly from me by emailing me at leadinglikeawoman@gmail.com. leadinglikeawoman@gmail.com. Thank you very much. So in terms of the presentation that I am giving today, in my introduction, I just wanted to indicate that the global economy, although it has evolved over time, it still hasn't gotten where we need it to be. For example, we know that nowadays there is a very clear distinction between the productive aspect of the economy, which is paid, and the reproductive aspect of the economy, which is unpaid. And guess who's doing the unpaid work? We know that most of the reproductive work is being done by women. We know that a lot of the changes that have happened really in the economy have happened in the last 150 to 300 years. We've had various stages, and I think the biggest stage was in the 18th century with industrialization, or the start of this trajectory. We moved on to mechanization in the 19th century, and mass production. And of course, in the 20th century, we had a lot of technological innovation. And now we are talking about artificial intelligence. And I think in all of the changes that have happened, we found that women have been marginalized in the development of the economy globally and even in our own country. And you'll find that there are very few women that you will see directing companies, directing businesses, or playing a meaningful role in the economy. And I make an example of Madame Sandbeck, who is the COO of Facebook. Can you move to the next slide, please? And of course, when we talk about the women's position, we also need to look at issues of development. For example, it is estimated that 6 million women are missing every year. Out of these, 23% are never born, 10% are missing in early childhood, 20% is missing in the reproductive years, and 38% are above the age of 60. It's still, these figures still do not capture the fact that throughout their lives, even before birth, women are treated differently than their brothers, lagging behind men in many domains. So for each missing woman, there are still many more women who fail to get an education, fail to get a job, fail to get a political responsibility that they would have obtained if they had been men. And I want to indicate that this statement about missing women is also telling us about systemic GBV. Can you please move to the next slide? We know that 2/3 of women are in the workforce compared to 90% of men. And this has been the case for the last 3 decades. In fact, women are more likely to be unemployed compared to men. 135 years is estimated to be a period we need for us to achieve pay equality with men. And we know that women do 3 times the amount of unpaid care work compared to men. So when we talk about economic development and when we talk about human development, hitting our targets, these are the things that we have to deal with to ensure that we are able to hit our targets for human development. Thank you. Next slide. And I think it's very important for us to understand that GBV is not just interpersonal. GBV is extremely systemic and it's extremely structural. Therefore, we must not talk about the GBV as if it's something that happens between one man and one woman. It's actually a system-wide phenomenon. It's all pervasive and it's structural. And probably we need to start talking about gender peace as well. So when we talk about GBV, we need to ensure that each and every area of our society is touched by the interventions that we need to make. if we really want to ensure that all women are in fact able to work without being disturbed, without being threatened, without being harassed. I've already spoken about reproductive and unpaid work, but the women's position also becomes problematic because when we look at leadership in the economy, we find that women still remain the majority of the managed. They are found in the lower levels within the economy, found as administrators, as cleaners. Very few women have been able to rise to management, to governance as well. This happens in spite of the educational attainment rates of women. The other challenge, or the position of women in the economy, also tells us that we have a big gender wage gap. In fact, globally, women earn $77 for every $100 that men earn. Women's conditions of service and benefits are still contested in the global economy. Women's issues are not always addressed in the global economy, even in our economy in South Africa. We find that many times when women raise issues within the economy, these are usually swept under the carpets. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So, what must be done? I think this is where now we need to try and ensure that we don't cheat in how we make our interventions, so that the economy, or so that economic development also assists us to ensure human development. Number one, we need to transform our structures, our systems, and the power structures that reinforce inequalities. We must be able to build a collective vision through approaches that value co-creation, that value dialogue, where we share perspectives and we share centering voices of historically marginalized groups, which means youth voices become important. And I'm actually very pleased, quite chuffed that we were able to get Ms. Mukwebo to be part of this discussion. We also need to ensure that we empower women economically, because women's economic empowerment is central for us to realize women's rights and gender equality. Definitely, we need to close the gender gap in the world of work, because when we close the gender gap in the world of work and we empower women economically, these are key interventions for us to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Next slide, please. Of course, we also need to ensure that more women are absorbed into the economy. I know that many women, in fact, especially in our developing nations, many women get to play a role in the informal economy, and really that needs to change. So we need to ensure that we are able to absorb more women into the formal economy, because when we do that, our economies grow. When we do that, we are able to boost productivity in our nations. We are able to ensure increased economic diversification and income equality. And there are a lot of other positive development outcomes. So as part of human development goals, ensuring that we develop our economies to absorb more women, especially into the formal economy, becomes important. It is estimated that gender gaps cost the economy some 15% of GDP. So we have to close gender gaps. in the economy so that that loss can be cut off. We also need to increase women's and girls' educational attainment. This contributes to women's economic empowerment and to more inclusive economic growth. So education, upskilling and reskilling over the life course are critical for women's and girls' health and well-being, as well as their income generation opportunities and participation in the formal labor markets. Can we move to the next slide, please? Women's economic equality, also something that we must do, is good for business. So we have to include women in the economy and ensure that we build women's economic equality. In fact, companies benefit a lot from increasing employment and leadership opportunities for women. It's not just a good look for women to be in leadership, but it also increases organizational effectiveness and growth of companies. In fact, there is a lot of evidence that suggests that companies actually benefit from having women in senior management of companies and also in governance of companies. When we have more women in senior management and governance, we find that those companies go higher in all dimensions of organizational performance. So leadership that is desirable in the economy will be a leadership that promotes corporate citizenship. So this is very important. So if we want to ensure that women develop, we must also ensure that our corporate citizenship as businesses is responsible. It's not only focused on the generation of profit to the exclusion of all else. We also know that in most companies globally, the profit is not distributed fairly between owners and managers on the one hand and employees on the other side. So we hope that leaders would have to consider ensuring that the profits are split fairly between the leadership of companies as well as the lower ranks of the companies. Next slide, please. We also have to ensure that issues of bullying and sexual harassment in the workplace are prevented through the development of comprehensive policies. We all know that GBV, sexual harassment, bullying, and so on, all of these things, first of all, they are against the respect for people's human rights. And when our human rights are not respected, we cannot be expected to contribute the way we are supposed to contribute to the economy. It means that companies must provide employee wellness programs on top of the policies that are cognizant that workers and managers come from different socializing contexts. Some of those contexts do not promote peace and mutual respect in the workplace. So companies must ensure that they resocialize their workers and managers towards a culture that is desired in that workplace. We also have to eliminate any discriminatory practices from the workplaces because these may affect women, migrant workers, gender non-conforming workers, disabled workers, young workers, etc. Next slide, please. So reproductive labor is a big issue. Just this week, there have been campaigns all over the country of women, protesting for better provision of care work. They were also protesting, asking for a feminist economy. So it's becoming a big issue, and we hope that legislatures are going to support these demands from women. So this means that there must be a conscious move and effort in valuing the contribution of reproductive labor into the GDP of our nation, and of course other nations as well. But this means that we need to do a lot of thinking about how different women or family units can be supported in providing the reproductive labor, because it goes a long way towards ensuring that the productive part of our economy is a success. We also need to increase the participation of women and other disadvantaged communities in the making of decisions within the economy, especially around what legislation, what policy, even at global level, as well as at national level. We also need to integrate mainstreaming of gender and disability in our policies to ensure that decisions taken at these forums do not discriminate against anyone or even achieve unintended results. So we have to ensure that in our policies we mainstream gender and disability. We also have to focus on the reduction of inequalities in our societies that allow for conditions of enslavement of some sections of humanity all over the world. Thank you. I just wanted to share some examples that I thought we need to replicate for human development. We've got Madame Mona Abu Sayam, who is a pivotal person in a show which is called Kalam Nawayam on Arab television. And that particular show, it discusses issues of women, it discusses issues of LGBTI, it pushes the boundaries. We've got Charlotte McGregor, of course, who didn't only look at her position as a leader, but she was able to ensure that more women are brought on board. And she actually preached a lot about that. That's when you go up, make sure that you bring another woman with you. We've got Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director of Oxfam, who dealt with Oxfam's sexual harassment scandal. We've got Krista Donaldson, who has been a CEO of DREV, a not-for-profit company that brings medical devices to people living on less than $4 a day. We've got many other women that I have cited here, but I'm hoping that colleagues and participants can access this presentation, because it actually indicates the kind of woman leadership that we need. It indicates the kind of interventions that can take us forward insofar as economic development and taking us forward to achieve our human development goals. Thank you very much, Program Director and Honorable.
Thank you.
We will now have a bit of entertainment, and we have the lovely Thembeka Mlaba, who is known as Mbile, who will give us a rendition of a very beautiful poem, or is it poem? English. Yeah. Thembeka, over to you, Sisi.
Thank you so very much. I hope you can see my face.
No, we can't.
All right, let me just Please give me one moment. It should come up now. How about now?
Now we can see your beautiful face.
Stop. I'd like to greet everybody who is here today. You see, like some of you ladies, when you were greeting, you're able to like greet everybody accordingly. I'm afraid to even start. Just in case I forget anyone, I would like to apologize. But I know if I say all protocol observed, you'll forgive me. Yes?
Definitely.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to greet everyone and thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here. Yes, may I also please apologize that my poem is sort of kind of tried to cater for everybody who is here and those who are not here and for everyday extraordinary women. So I really hope and pray that I will be able to capture who you are because I'll be rushing through it so that I'll be able to get everybody. Yes, so please I apologize for calling you by your name. I know it's the one thing I'm sure belongs to you. I hope I pronounce it well. And please forgive me to those who I was not able to call their names. Yes. So yes, as our lovely program director said, my name is Tembe Kamlaba. My stage name is Mbile. Yes, Tembe Kamlaba, soon to change to Mrs. Kumede. Yes, so thank you so much for having me. I'm not sure if people or ladies who have an okay background, sound-wise, are able to interact or communicate. I'm not sure if that's going to disrupt anything.
Your background is fine, my darling. You can continue.
Okay, and then I was also checking for anybody who may like to, But anyways, thank you so much for having me yet again. I will talk about women from all walks of life, but they are very much extraordinary. Please forgive me if I call you by your name, but I will try my best to capture each and every name from A to Z. Hopefully, your name falls under that alphabet, and even if I don't get to call your name, you'll know that I have you in my heart. A, Abongile. Atenkosi. B, Busisiwe, Beatrice. I'm going to call you by your name because you're not only just a prayer warrior, but you're also a pastor and a woman. C. C is the third letter of the alphabet. She comes after B, who comes after A. She is a rebel. She's very disruptive. She is mayhem to the unjust. C is the one that they chose to call her name disruptive, the Black Voldemort, the first Black woman. Every time I search for her, I hear and see the first Black woman to graduate with a BC, not only just here, but she went abroad. The first Black woman, they call her Charlotte. I'm going to call her by her name, and I know that wherever she is, she can hear my name because I'm just a young voice that has made a choice to call her today because this year is celebrated for her. I'm going to call her mayhem to the unjust because she's disrupted. She's disrupted a whole lot of things. She was the first Black woman to do A, B, C, and D. And I would like to call her by her name, D. Or rather, let's go back to Eliwe. What a nice warm welcome. D for Daniela, for Deborah. Rather, let me just say, for Deborah, a woman who was also a judge. E for Esther. Oh, hail the queen. Fix your crown. I hope you hear me calling your name. Let my voice echo to wherever you are. Let it be as loud as it possible. It must really go far. I am going to call F. Fundi, I have a question. Should we not all just lead like a woman? G for Gugu, Gail, Goma. They may have called you a prostitute, but you were in the book, the Bible. You played a role. H for Hannah, the mother of Samuel. But let me rather just call Hlengiwe. I see you, Hlengiwe. I also have a Hlengiwe, Wakamkabateli, the first woman that I saw that through her, it can all actually be done. We called her the mother of nation, and even though she did not have a child of her own, but we were all her children. I, for Imani, for Immaculate, this is all women that I hear. Actually, this is for you, and I hope this touches your heart. I hope this awakens your spirit, because you are woman. Jay Gatazan. That may have been a joke, but each and every one of us here know about this mythical creature. Jade, a mother of twins. Oh, I love her. Kega Kolega. I feel so protected because she's the protector. L Galandega.
Yes.
You with the sense of humor. You better not scare your mom with them videos that you're trying to make, girl. But I'm now gonna say M Kambile. Yours truly. You can call me your poet who's used to commanding stages, commanding rooms, and now commanding webinars. I am among the greatest women here in KZN and abroad, and I am here, and you have given me just the time of your time so that you can hear me. I am proud of me. M from Pume, my sister-in-law. N. Ooh, what a long list of women that I've heard about whose name starts with an N. Nostelo, Nosiviwe, Notando, my little sister. Nonto, you know who you are. Ndivo, will always remember you. Nonjabulo. And last but not least, on the ends, if I could just hear you say her name, I know you know who she is. She's not only the speaker, but she's also been the chief whip. Oh my goodness, why? Why am I in this position where I get to call the names of the greatest women that have ever lived, the everyday woman? Not only just our beautiful Charlotte, but you who is here, I'm talking to you. Tell them, speaker, you said you are the woman in futhi khale sakhe isicathulo lana. Yes. Ooh, I would love to call your name, but I'm just going to respect it. And I'm going to say it starts with an N. I am going to move on to O for opera. P for Pearl. I see you. I see you. Not only Pearl Tuse, but even you, Wakastole. And I'm going to say P for Pindile. Do I even say or begin where I have met you and the places that I've seen you, but you, oh woman, I'm calling your name today. I'm calling your name today. Q for Kondi, R for Rebecca, for Ruth. Let me not say what you have done, oh woman. I'm going to say S for Sarah. Sarah, I have a question. Shouldn't we all just become feminist? Shouldn't we all just be feminist? Cindy Siwe, Cindy. S for Slindile. Another sister-in-law. Senamile, you have outlived all your sicknesses. Let's take a pause and let's say it again. T for Tembeka. And that again will be me. Pella, I have to dance to the beat of my own drum because I, again, am a woman that I call myself as woman. I am inspired by me. Not only have I become the regional leader for KZN, but I'm bringing technology to schools and have employed 156 young youth of KZN. Can you say my name? Not only am I the boss, but I am also the wife to the proud Sakile Gumede. T for Tandi, my beautiful attorney. She commands the room, as I have said. U for Utando, for Eunice. V for Vuyiswa. I'm going to trace it back because also my mother's name is Vuyiswa, the mother of 4. But I'm going to say to the deputy chief whip, I know, Batata and Ntombazane, as you fix that whip because you're Indlela, KZN legislator, you have the greatest woman to ever be alive. I can say many things about you because you are my mother and you use my mother's name, but I'm just going to leave it there. Because we're not only drinking tea, we're also drinking coffee. I am going to go to W. W is for woman. We are women. I decided not to put a name there because each and every one of us can remember ourselves. We are women, even though we are not the womb man. Each and every one of us have a womb that can carry a man. So I'm going to be the one who says to you, you are woman, Masechaba. You are the one that commands all nations. They say, woman, you are the one that made the whole world to go astray. But exactly the same woman is the one that brought back and brought the one who forgave sins of all men. You are woman. You and I are here because we are united by one thing. We are women, and we can never be muted because our voices can scream out loud. They do not only carry pain of the nations, but these voices that we have are the ones that if they are kept quiet, then the whole world will go astray. You are women. You and I today can see ourselves, even though last night we were battered and bruised and bashed against the walls, even though we were walking on rose petals, but we still carry the same smile that will heal all the nations, if you know what I mean. Oh, woman, you are so different. And now I'll go to X for Uxoli, Obaxolela noma bemxhaphaza. We are all here to uY, oyoliswa, to OZ, ozobi, ozandi, ozanele, ozandile, yes, kwanele. If they take away your smile, just know that I am inspired by all women from A to Z. I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by the woman who tries. I'm inspired by a woman who tried, a woman who's tired, a woman who died with watermarks dried in her eyes and her face, beautifully marked. Your tears did not just die along with you. You are here with us today and we carry your spirit. Your emotions were evoked from the depth of her soul by the woman who carried and miscarried, by the woman who smiled and missmiled, by the woman who married or mismarried. You are still woman, no matter who you are, no matter what walk of life you have been in. Woman from A to Z, I am calling you today to be with me. We don't know what others carry, but some others, they carry a lot than others. Some others, they were buried. Some others buried their loved ones. Some others were unloved. I am inspired by you, no matter what you have been through. Oh, beautiful boo-boo. I'm inspired by me. I carry a smile in my face that is as heavy as the world that I carry, but I am a woman. And if you and I stand hand in hand, you know, they say that we are the ones that hate each other. Actually, I think that's a myth because look at how many women are gathered right here today. I am inspired. You are a pillar. You are strong as the legislature itself. You are the law. You are a woman. You carry the cries and you carry the cries of each and every lady that you have come across. You are so strong. You can cry and you can smile at the same time. And you can give birth and you have bled each and every month of your life. Listen, honey, it doesn't matter if they've stabbed you with a knife or you're just an ordinary woman who they call the wife. It doesn't matter. All that matters that you are a woman and I'm inspired by you. You carry the world in your shoulders and you have forgiven and you have forgiven. And so I stand here today to say thank you, woman, because without you, I wouldn't be. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you need Tembe. Come on, Tembe. Ladies and gentlemen, please remember her name. Tembe Kamlava. Thank you very much, Mtanam. Thank you so much for that. If you can hear the noise in this bedroom where I am, everyone is really shouting. Thank you so much, Ndodakazi, really. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, we will then continue with our program. And we'd like to remind our fellow panelists on the 15 minutes rule. That is why at times when we want to interject, but we don't want to disturb our speakers, but we just want to remind our panelists of time, because obviously we have other speakers who still need to present. Up next is Professor Pearl Sithole, Professor Mpilo Sithole, who is a social anthropologist by training, has an interest in issues of governance, gender, and development. She has worked with various academic research institutions in South Africa, has delved into public service, consulting, as well as into the civil society. Her writings include a book titled Unequal Peers, The Politics of Discourse Management in Social Science, which was published in 2009. She has also written a number of articles on governance, development, and on knowledge production. She has also written recently an article on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on developmentalism. In 2011, she was recognized by the South African Department of Science and Technology with the Women in Science Award for her sterling work in social science. She recently was appointed by Pope Francis into the Pontifical Academy of Social Science. We welcome you, Professor Sithole, and over to you, Madam.
Thank you very much, Program Director. I am a bit nervous that I am going to be unable to recognize all women of such high esteem by recognizing their names and positions because of the whip that you just cracked on time. But in the name of Mama Charlotte Maxege, a change maker par excellence, I'd like to greet all of you, from the speakers and the fellow panelists, as well as everyone who is here today. I am humbled to be in this forum with you. I wanted to present okay, it's here, the presentation in terms of PowerPoint, but I won't be looking at the screen. Whoever is assisting will need to actually see and move on and move along with it, because I'm reading my own notes. Really, I was put on the spot, Chair and Program Director, because I was asked to speak about the impact of the recent upheavals on the economic status of women. And actually, I don't want to speak about that until thorough research has been done on the impact of this recent upheaval. But I actually want to speak about the impact of the recent economic crunch on women in every way, and perhaps to hint at the fact that the recent upheaval is because of the strain of the crunch economically and resulting in the kind of social behavior that we have just seen. But I wanted to start off by saying a writer by the name of Shirin Hasim warned us. And she said, I would argue that we need to maintain a healthy suspicion about the ability of the post-apartheid state, this was in 1991, about the ability of the post-apartheid state to meet the demands of women and to anticipate policies that will empower women. This is not just to suggest that we are necessarily opposing to an ANC government. However, we need to take heed from the experiences of women in other parts of the world. As women in Zimbabwe and Mozambique have discovered, despite the government's avowed commitment to gender equality, women are gradually pushed back into traditional roles. If they take on new tasks of building the nation, it must be in addition to the other burdens at work within the household. So basically, we were warned before the new dispensation came into being that there might actually be a problem when it comes to remembering the women and their role in society post the struggle and into the liberation space. Hasim was not only talking, was actually talking from experiences just in observing history and what had happened elsewhere. I have looked into these things and looked at Hasim's interpretation, and I have put forward an observation that the struggles themselves are ranked, which is part of the reason why patriarchy is actually systemic, with the gender struggle being the most trivial in most societies. That the order of the value of struggles is such that the political struggle, as in terms of identities such as race and other issues, is put at the top and becomes primary. That in a linear fashion, the economy begins to be a tussle and maneuvering and begins to be the most important struggle, which uses very subtle tactics to maintain status quo of certain groups. And then gender, which would have been sprinkled everywhere else, begins to actually become important as and when end of documents are written. So identity issues such as those related to gender especially, and sexuality and kinship, are actually located at a household level, and they are underpinned by social ideologies that actually support inequality, and they become the last consideration, with politics and economics being primary. I've spoken to the privatization of subjugation and the privatization of solving the problem of inequality. In other words, there is serious stuff at institutional level that we deal with on a daily basis in terms of deliverables. And then we have to consider the plight of women, which incidentally is about persuading people in their private spaces. So patriarchy is institutionalized from state to sectors to family in this structural fashion. I think May Zimande used the term structural, because it features in and is placed somewhere where we don't really deal with when we're dealing with serious matters. The state is leading by example in terms of stifling women, actually. The association of the presidency and the portfolio of finance with men is symbolic of the association of men with being head and professional pursuit with being male within the families. Many institutions are mimicking this throughout, and this includes business, actually. So what you then see as of the second quarter of 2021 in terms of statistics should not actually be a surprise. That the unemployment rate of South Africa ranks the highest in the world, which is a point we need to examine itself, because international anything is not innocent in the plight of what is happening in South Africa now, given the patronizing relationships that we've endured and the colonization that never actually ended. It just became more funky, as we call it, globalization and all sorts of other terms. But in that, you find that women are actually 8% higher in terms of being unemployed than men. You find that managerial positions are 66.9 male, and that 33% only in terms of managerial positions is female. And of course, in what women do, they are doing the mundane stuff mostly, the domestic, clerical, and technical positions that then serve the institution so that men can present it. Of course, Hasim warned us, and immediately after she warned us, we know who was at the negotiating table. And those policies that are not really quite helpful to women are as a result of the profile of that table of negotiations, actually. We also know, as Sithole keeps warning, that the redress that is currently being proffered is actually fake. Because it then says, usually, allow women into spaces of the serious spaces of power, and women go into these serious spaces of power still with the burden of being supporting to men, which is what you are seeing in that picture, and being supporting to family, being nurturing to society generally. And so they come to professional spaces with all of these obligations, and they are not catered for as burdened women in those professional spaces. I want to then suggest that what defines the current moment in South Africa, and I'm not far from finishing, Chair, is a soke sibabone, a kind of bubble that we have been living in, finally exploding. This bubble where the ranking of struggles has been locked all the time has been so suffocating that finally you see what we've just seen. The soke sibabone bubble that I'm talking about, soke sibabone means let's see what they will do. So you have a situation where business is white by constant maneuver, an attitude of let them hold on to political power, soke sibabone what they will do with it. Then you have men who have been half-hearted on gender equality, an attitude of let's give them some professional leeway, soke sibabone what they will do because culturally they are supposed to support us. Then you have government and organizations and institutions massifying space of mundaneness with women assisting and being regulated, an attitude of soke sibabone, let them prove themselves in our terms because institutions are generally patriarchal. So if you saw women looting, it is because of the fact that we are all liable for an amazing strain at the bottom of struggles that contain women at the bottom, and that strain has been impossible, especially on the women and youth. So you can judge and say, how Mama Mdala Kangaka, why is she looting? Look, she's on camera now. But the truth of the matter is you need to judge what would have been happening on women systematically, which led to the explosion during COVID times. So what to do, basically, in the last two slides? We have to confront the intersectionality of issues of women. And sometimes when you sit in forums like this year after year and you talk about the relationship between work, home, cultural prejudice, and power, it appears to the first-class citizens that men are, that we are clumsy, we are linking so many issues, and we are scattered, and we are stretching it a bit too much. For sure, it will appear like that to men because they are privileged with neatness of life because they are supported. The time to act on the intersectionality is now, and from the spaces that we occupy and take seriously our spaces to the contribution of doing the things that we need to do. And it had better be led by women because actually, even if this struggle of gender is between us and the people that we love so much, who are our sons and fathers and partners, no beneficiary of any privilege will lead the struggle to liberate the other. So, on the economy, we have to look into policies and sector plans and how they marginalize the participation of women who are burdened as they enter the world of work. We need to look into institutional patriarchy of our state and institutions and talk to these things, because actually it is not enough, no matter even if we achieve 50% tomorrow. But if we don't break the symbolism of the president being male and of the symbolism contained in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development continuously being male, then we are mimicking what is happening in the family. We have to look at how businesses use race and gender to maneuver such that they maintain status quo and create a fake redress such that things continue the way they are, especially with regards to capital. You just need to take the issue of why it is that many agents of property are often white women. And even socially, we need to bring the issue of the social change from being at the corner there into the space of work and make work deal with those things. But also socializing boys and girls differently. Use that life orientation story at the school much more productively in terms of talking about things that matter. And of course, looking at religion and culture, especially the gendered authorship of the Holy Scripts, which drum it every Sunday that women must be submissive, they must be support machinery to men, and that is their reason of existence. That program director is the story and mission of my life. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Tole, for that story of your life. Very informative and thought-provoking. I am sure those who are following in the various platforms of the legislature are also in awe as we are. Thank you so much, Professor, for that presentation. We will now cross over to Advocate Galeka, the daughter of Umzimkulu in Herigwala District Municipality, who holds a law degree, obtained a certificate from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, currently studying LLM Commercial Law in the University of Johannesburg, served as a special advisor and senior state advocate, and occupied various positions within the National Public Prosecutions. She is an admitted advocate of the High Court of South Africa and a former national chairperson of the South African Society of State Advocates. She is also a member of the Black Lawyers Association and has over 14 years of experience with 8 years in the senior management. She's very young, but has a lot of experience in the field where she is. Over to you, Advocate Galeka.
Thank you so much, Program Director. I get a sense you've been reading a bit of an old profile, but it is fine. Thank you so much. Greetings, I bring you warm greetings from the Office of the Public Protector, Honorable Chairperson of the session, the Speaker of KZN Legislature, the panelists here before today, the leadership of the province here today, and mostly I'd like to pass our warm greetings and congratulations to the Speaker of the National Assembly, who is our mother as a Chapter 9 institution, Umamuno Siviwe Maphisa Nqakula. I'd like to thank you, KwaZulu-Natal, for the opportunity that you have given the Office of the Public Protector to be able to share with you the impact of gender-based violence on women and on the economy. Under the year of Umama Charlotte Maxeke, realizing the rights of women, I hope, I sometimes wish we could paint a different picture, especially when we are celebrating or commemorating great women like her who have paved the path for the rest of us. I really wish we could say we have come further than what we have come, but I'm hoping in years to come we'll be able to give a different picture. I am reading, or I'll be referring from my side. I hope it is projected on your side, Program Director. I am unable to see the screen because I have opened on my notes. If you could kindly just indicate.
It's now showing, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll probably go faster than the projection. I think the topic that I've been given today, the impact of gender-based violence on women and the economy, I cannot begin to speak on the effects that it has than to define gender-based violence itself. Having worked with matters or association with matters of gender-based violence for over 17 years, I wish to just give a broader definition to gender-based violence, merely just as a physical or a sexual harm or suffering of women, but to extend it to economic, psychological, financial, emotional, including threats of such acts as coercion or arbitration, deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private lives of women. And I want to give emphasis to young women, vulnerable women, such as women with disabilities, whom we seldom speak about. So basically, this is a scourge or a cancer that affects women across all boards, across all cycles of life, politically, professionally, in all environments, rural women in particular, illiterate women in particular. And we've seen in the recent years how we've mainly been affected by trafficking in persons, especially amongst young women who go into the world in sought for economic or better economic means. Further, I just want to state that, when women live in these abusive relationships, whether it's domestically or out of a domestic relationship, financial abuse it becomes the key factor, mostly in the work environment or in the domestic environment. It is really a global pandemic. We can't just say it's a pandemic for us as a country, but I must say the figures have really looked much, much higher for us as South Africa. According to, if you look at the global picture, according to the UN and World Bank reports, GBV or violence against women and girls affects 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. The numbers are staggering, but they look bad. 35% of women worldwide have experienced either physical or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence. Globally, 7% of women have been sexually violated by someone other than a partner. Globally, as many as 38% of murders of women are committed by an intimate partner. This issue is not only devastating for the survivors of violence and their families, but it also entails significant social and economic costs. In some countries, violence against women is estimated to cost countries up until 3.7% of their GDP, more than double what most governments spend on education. So if we hear governments saying that a greater part of the fiscus goes to the wage bill and any other leaks that they identify, but they don't identify GBV as a major cost impact on our fiscus, and which then means that it then affects how they then address the issues of GBV, because as they address issues which are heavy on the fiscus, they are able to come up with more speedily solutions. But in terms of GBV, because it has not yet been identified into that bracket, maybe that is why we are a little bit slower than we should be in respect of addressing that. I will just pass the slide on the cost drivers in other countries, and just speak to the, when you quantify the cost of consequences of GBV, it is proven challenging, particularly women engage in large amounts of unpaid labor. And I think one of the presenters spoke around those figures, like in the household, that really does not reflect on the formal economy, and which really is what we were raised to be. It is the work of the woman. So the work of the woman, even from our upbringing, has not been quantified, and it is still not been quantified even today. That is why you find most women being on the backlash, especially when they approach the maintenance courts, when they go on divorces. They are unable to quantify their existence or their value. And this is something that really needs to change within the law, where women are really recognized beyond monetary value. Yet it is clear that monetary costs are borne because of the days lost at work, treatment cost of injuries, and all the criminal justice system resources that get into the investigation of gender-based violence. Study in South Asia under the auspices of the World Bank revealed that violence against girls and women undermines the country's achievement of at least 6 out of the 8 United Nations Millennium Development Goals. And this just makes me think of our own NDP. If we speak of inclusive growth, economic growth, who does this economic growth include? Because definitely from the surface as South African women, we really do not play a major part within the economic world, whether it's on the professional level, whether it's in business, and any other sectors of our lives. Social and economic costs of GBV globally, direct and indirect costs. These are individual and family costs, community, business costs, which is mainly the work, as I've indicated earlier on, that is being done by us women, which is really not being quantified. Let me give an overview of us here at home, we call it a new normal because day in and day out, what we hear and see is GBV and femicide. We have actually gotten to that level as a country. There appears to be an all-out warfare on women, whether it's by men or other women as well, by the way, The enormity of this catastrophe is exemplified by frequent headline-grabbing news stories of brutality. I mean, we've seen how this has just blown out of proportion, especially during Women's Month. Is it because there's more focus to it? Is it because there's more reporting to it? But be as it may, the numbers are really gruesome and they are alarming. Sadly, seems not much is being done to address the problem. Instead, each incident becomes a new story. Everybody talks and tweets about it to express their anger. We create a catchphrase about it, and thereafter, after Women's Month, it all phases out. And just over a week ago, the Minister of Police, and this is very, very critical, and this is where the money is going into, instead of working on other areas of growth, but this is just where the money is going into. The Minister of Police released what he termed a never seen before rise in the reporting of offences, including GBV. According to those statistics, 76,936 cases of common assault and assault with intention to cause grievous bodily harm, which were reported in the period April to June 2021, and more than 15,000 were domestic violence-related cases. Whereas more than 10,000 people were raped during the same period, marking a staggering increase of more than 7,000 or 72.4% when compared to the same period last year. Well, having come from the background of the security cluster, I know that it may not necessarily mean that the numbers are increasing in society, but it may also mean that awareness is increasing. People are becoming more confident to report, probably, and therefore the reporting of the matters is increasing more. Further, a sample of 5,439 of rape cases show that 3,766 took place in the same home of either the perpetrator of the victim or the victim. About 487 of the rape cases were domestic violence related. So what we call our safe haven, our safe space as women, is not necessarily our safe space. And to add really an assault to the injury, femicide in the country is 5 times higher than the global average. And the female interpersonal violence death rate was the 4th highest out of 183 countries listed by the World Health Organization in 2016. 1 in 5 women experience violence in the hands of a man, 5% experience sexual abuse, and 45% psychological abuse. In 2019 and 2020, there was an average increase of 146 sexual offenses and 116 specifically rape cases per day, predominantly rape, compared to the same period for the year 2018-2019. In March 2020, the government's GBV and Femicide Command Center, a call center to support victims of GBV, which I must say, it is a good way in the right direction, and probably it is the reason why we are receiving more reported cases, because as I said before, there is more awareness that's being made. So this center has recorded more than 120,000 victims in the first 3 weeks of the lockdown. Now we go back to the impact of the pandemic. It has just exacerbated the challenges that women are facing in society. Just weeks later, in Pretoria, a small call center was receiving up to 1,000 calls a day from women and children who were confined to abuse homes seeking urgent help. Now, we also look at abuse of children who are in centers, who are in shelters, who've been fostered. And also once they get out of those foster homes, what then happens to them? They also become vulnerable to abuse. It means that the cycle of poverty is reinforcing itself within their lives. I also just like us to look at the drivers of GBV. Gender norms and discrimination have constantly been reported in South Africa and other global settings as the key driver of GBV. Now, these include what we define as masculinity, that are centered on male control over women, male sexual entitlement, inequitable gender attitude, taking risk, and antisocial behavior. Ideas about femininity that promote women's subordination to men. When I was at varsity studying law and looking into cultural law, we were told that culture is not static, it moves with times. But we seem like in our country, legislators are reluctant, to ensure that culture moves with the times, and particularly to enforce the principle of that culture must be in line with morals. It must be in line with the way of living. So culture cannot be above the law, but we still keep having the superiority of culture when it comes to women over and above the law in all corners of our life. Historical economic injustices resulting in enduring poverty among women and their families present a significant determinant of GBV. Poverty and GBV are mutually reinforcing, with poverty increasing women's risk of experiencing violence. So the more women are not economically active or regarded as being economically active, the more exposed they are to gender-based violence, and also the more the burden on the country's economy. So the two really are coexisting, and they need to be dealt with in such a manner, not one in separation with the other, if we really as a country want to move forward in the fight under the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide. Exposure to violence and the ideas that tolerate violence begins in childhood through how children are socialized are called all settings, at home, at school, which is also reinforced publicly. Education is another significant direct determinant of greater economic dependency on male partners and diminished control in the relationship. I was addressing the Northern Cape just a few days ago, and I make reference to books I have read. How many books have been written by women? Look at our history, look at our geography, look at our life orientation. Who are the heroes? Who are our children made to learn about? Mostly it is men. So we are bound then to remain a society or a country that believes that men are superior than men, because what is all great out there, what we hear of, is men, and mostly even how we socialize our girls and boys. They are raised wearing pink and blue. The girls is pink, the boys is blue. Women in most cultures have to be obedient. They have to look down. They have to not look up at men. But when you get into the boardroom, you find the boardroom is blue. The boardroom is black. The boardroom is not pink. If you enter a boardroom wearing pink, especially in professions like the law, the economic profession, you are frowned upon. It's not the etiquette. But when you socialize this little girl, you socialize them again on pink. So what does that mean psychologically? And having to unlearn that as an adult and as a professional already, which has a bigger impact than just the color. Whereas the boy is socialized to be blue, to be bold, to stand up, to stand tall and look up. And that's how the boardroom is, which means that as a nation and as a people, we socialize our boy children to be economically suitable, and our girl children not to be. And that is where really we need to start looking back into the issues. And those are major drivers into GBV. Alcohol consumption as well. And I see in most areas as well, you find having these shebeens and taverns around homes, around schools. The regulation thereof really needs to be monitored. But mostly, let's look at the systemic failures, to protect, support, and attain justice for women once they've been abused. And also, this is a reactory process, I still emphasize that we need to start on a preventative measure. But let's look at the reactive factors, specific groups of women, such as women with disabilities, trans women, because we also look at broadly into the LGBTAIQ plus community as well, in accessing services and how friendly are these services for them. The special rapporteur report on VAW in South Africa suggested that the failure of the Domestic Violence Act, and this is a very critical act in protecting women, was because of its gender-neutral nature. Now, lack of access to essential services for safety and protection and recovery, which include timely health care. In rural areas, in my very hometown of Umzimkulu, the hospital is in Red Flare, and we've got how many villages, which is hours and hours driving through mountains, and it would be walks for those who do not have the transport to access to police response. I mean, we still see the rural women being highly affected in this respect. Access to justice, the courts are in town. Placement in alternative care, which includes shelters and other foster care, you hardly find these kind of issues, or rather these kind of centers in rural areas, which has a major economic disparity in our country. It actually broadens it, you know. But also the lack of government accountability and responsibility for effectively addressing GBV. And I know that we're going to say we've got this legislation and that legislation, which I fully agree with. In fact, South Africa is one of the most progressive countries in the world when it comes to our legislation. We pride ourselves about it. But when it comes to the implementation of the legislation, that's where our biggest challenge is. Many years ago, when I was still in the NPA, I used to represent the NPA in the Law Reforms Commission. And the major issues that we identified, in contrast to what other progressive countries do in respect of reaction and fighting GBV, like the US, the UK, is that they first develop a resource before even the law is passed. But what we do, we put more effort and resource into developing the law. But who is going to implement it and how? Now, you've passed this law, you put time frames in monitoring it, but that is when the development of capacity and the resource is beginning to first understand the law, ensure that people are able to carry it out. I mean, now we just had the cybersecurity and cybercrimes bill. What is our capacity in respect of cyber holistically as a country? How does cyber affect issues of GBV? Child pornography, it happens on cyber. Human trafficking, it happens on cyber. We are lacking as a country. We've got the law. We don't have the resource. We don't have the capacity. How are we going to implement? The law is standing on its own. So I think lawmakers really need to look into that by the time we begin the policy or the legal drafting on a framework, simultaneously the building of the capacity needs to begin to ensure that by the time the law is enacted, the country is all systems go, we are able to implement and we are able to measure the effectiveness on a fair ground, you know. The lack of an effective justice system is an impediment to the GBV victims seeking help and further increases their risk. I mean, recently, as the Office of the Public Protector, the Deputy Minister of Justice reported a case to us of a young female in Cape Town who had approached their courts seeking a protection order. She was later killed, and they wanted to know what were the systemic issues. Upon our investigation, we couldn't blame the personnel, you know, because they advised the lady accordingly and gave her the necessary form. But she did not complete it. It was too tedious to complete. The process was tedious. So as a result, we have now decided to embark on a systemic investigation to really look into the systemic issues and the structural issues throughout the criminal justice system that impede on the fight against gender-based violence and issues of maintenance. We really hope that that investigation is really going to make a difference into the fight on gender-based violence. We further look here at a study that was done in the Western Cape, you know, on the safety protection of these victims and how they are being attended to. And it all shows that we're still lacking behind as a country, and there's really a challenge. Now, we count the cost as a country. We're speaking billions, you know, 28.4 billion. And 42.4 billion per year, or between 0.9% and 1.3% of our GDP annually as a country in fighting gender-based violence. Deservingly so. But if really we could improve more on our system, improve more on our structural defenses, I think we would really see this going down, you know. But also we see that businesses suffer more. Now, this is where we are looking that these would stimulate our economic growth. But how do they stimulate it? Because victims are now not at work. They are at home. They have been victimized. They're taking sick leave. They are unable to productively participate at work. Now, this is a cost to GDP. We cannot, whilst we are leaving the scourge at the level in which we are, and yet say we are looking at business as part of a stimulus package as a country. The cost to the health system. You know, just recently we heard over the news of girl children who've been pregnant. These girl children have been through the health system. They still need to go through that health system in order to receive all sorts of care that is required, psychosocial care that's required. How many % of these people really go through the health system, not just for trauma, ordinary trauma, you know? But we also heard from one of the speakers as well that the impact a car accident has on a woman, you know, this also adds to the health system or the cost to our health system. I've spoken about the one on justice, the prosecution, how much is being invested into gender-based violence. It's quite a lot as a country when we could really rather look at means and ways of how do we rather eradicate the scourge. Recently, the KPMG presented a study on a number of recommendations which support raised by other similar studies. There's been so many similar studies, but what they are really emphasizing on is the strengthening of data collection and record keeping, build on existing cost estimates, including cost of implementing GBV legislation, identify the business case for investing in GBV, ensure an effective intersectoral funding model, because really a government can't do it alone, you know. How does the entire sector, how do we bring business, how do we bring civil society together for us to be able to invest really into the funding of GBV, encourage the private sector and all other stakeholders, track the results of the intervention. And that is the critical one, because that's where you are able to identify where the gaps are, because you are tracking the results. That one thing that we've done right as a country, and as I've said previously, is a sound legal framework, and we should continue to pride ourselves with that. But we really need to really put more emphasis on the implementation. And we keep on amending this legal framework, and by the time we're amending, we are leaving the implementers behind. They're still trying to catch up with the first phase of the first regulations of the legal framework, but then we move on to amending. It's not working. But where do we get the data from? How do we make that assessment that it is not working? We have many laws: Employment Equity Maintenance Act, Unfair Discrimination Act, Domestic Violence Protection Against Harassment Act, the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. I mean, it speaks of all, and that all includes women, you know. To add to that, an arsenal of institutions that have been set up ourselves as Chapter 9 institutions, the Commission of Gender Equality, we even had the Ministry of Women, Children and People with Disability. All of those, you know, our structure and form is there, you know, but really, what is the challenge? Where are we really lacking as a country? What do we do, you know? This year, I've really decided to rewire my thinking around issues of GBV. And I've been saying that instead of us really looking and saying, where do we do this? Where do we do that? It starts with self. It starts with each one of us, especially those of us in positions of authority, in positions of leadership. If an action happens in your presence, and you keep quiet, you ignore it, it means you are supporting it. And inaction a discrimination, an injustice, and a prejudice towards a woman, whether it's you, it's a woman you don't know, or anybody else. But if you are in that position of authority and you let that slide, it means that you are not transformative in nature. It is merely a lip service that we speak of the transformation. And I mean, as the latter speaker has also said, all ministers of finance we've had are male. And by the way, the economic cluster itself, from a political leadership and an administrative leadership, it is male. There's a book I love to refer to, The Rule of Law by Tom Bingham, where it speaks about the hands in whose authority is the law, because those are the hands that are entrusted with execution of the law. If those hands are not transformative in themselves, if those hands are not progressive in themselves, it doesn't matter whether they are male or female, but structurally, systematically, if they are not transformed, they will not be able to transform. And the same applies in respect of this subject that we are dealing with here today. In conclusion, really what I want to say that as women, we really have to pull one another. We have to pull together. The numbers are appalling. I think our generation, being led by the generation, we really need to turn the wheel, turn the direction. And I don't think our Mama Charlotte Makaike had anticipated that in 2021, so almost 3 decades into democracy, we would still be here. We would still not be as economically active as we are supposed to be, not be participating, not be part of the inclusive economic growth as women. So we really need to accelerate and ensure that as women we have a broader. One, it needs to start with our literacy. How is our literacy? What is the literacy of the boy child? Because we coexist. We can't concentrate on one and not concentrate on the other. Because as much as we are bringing up the girl child, but the boy child is there. It's part of their heritage, it's part of their system. And if they're not equally transformed and empowered, we are going to find ourselves keep on stepping back as a nation instead of going forward. And as I step down, I would really want to conclude in the powerful words by a renowned author, Marian Dora Williamson, when she wrote, I quote her, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will not feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in everyone. As we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give others permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others." I unquote. I thank you.
Thank you so much, the Deputy Public Protector of the Republic. We have noted the disclaimer earlier on when you started, and we'll certainly correct. We will contact your office to correct the profile. I'm sure colleagues are wondering why we are generous with time, but when you are talking around issues of gender-based violence in an era where women are killed brutally so, and obviously the information that was presented by Advocate Galega is one that we really do need to hear. So it was for that reason that we extended the time that was allocated to the advocate. We would like to equally apologize to the Speaker of the National Assembly, Umama Unosviwe. We know there are a lot of activities around Parliament, and the scheduled time that we had allocated for her has really exceeded. what we had requested from the office, and sincerely mama sicela ukuthi sixolise kuwe for delaying you. We will now take the Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Umama Unosviwe Mapisa Nqakula, who is the Speaker of the National Assembly of South Africa. She is the former Minister of the Defense and Military Veterans in the Republic. She is a leader, leading in the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, led in the Women's League. She has many strides. We can write a book when we speak about Umama Unqakula. She is part of the member of the Theme 3 core group of the constitution making process since 1994. And we did say she has served in the leagues of the ANC as amongst the Women's League as the Secretary General. So when we are speaking of the Speaker of the National Assembly, we speak of Umama, who some of us, whose shoulders we stand on, and we are really privileged, Mamunosviwe, for your presence in this webinar. We are truly humbled. We know, Guti, it was a bit of a short notice, but you indulged us and you did not complain. We truly do appreciate your presence. We now hand over to you as our keynote speaker to then speak on the topic that we have requested. Siyabulela kakhulu mama. Over to you, Somlo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Program Director, Honorable Speaker of the Legislature, all presiding officers of the Legislature in KZN, members of the Executive, Chief Whips and other whips of political parties, honorable members, invited participants. As I was listening to the Deputy Public Protector, I thank you, Mr. Leka. Fellow South Africans, once again, it is August month, the month of women in South Africa. So naturally, we've spent this month a lot of time as leaders and as women, talking and engaging women and society on matters related to us. As the month of August 2021 comes to a close, literally today, it may also be important not only to worry about what we have assessed as achievements for women's empowerment over almost 3 decades of our democracy, but maybe specifically, we must also make a frank assessment on the impact we have made through these discussions and engagements since the launch of this August month this year. Is there value add to the cause of our struggles as women through these engagements and platforms? And what is it that we can improve? Let me thank you, Honorable Boyce, the Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Legislature, and your entire leadership team for inviting us to this occasion, the session of the KZN chapter of the Commonwealth Women's Parliamentarians. This network of Commonwealth parliamentarians from 180 legislatures within the Commonwealth countries have for over 30 years now has been in the forefront of placing issues of gender sensitivity, women representation, and capacity building for women globally. In essence, this network has become the global organized voice through which women issues have found way into and gained priority within various legislatures and governments. It is therefore important for South Africa as a member of this network to meet in the manner that we are doing, to evaluate the success we are making here, to achieve both the objectives of this network and those that we have set for ourselves regarding the gender agenda of Parliament and our legislatures. Ours has been a journey littered with a mix of notable successes and many missed opportunities since 1994. Program Director, it only seems like yesterday when we first entered this intimidating building, the halls of power in the chamber of the National Assembly in 1994. It was indeed a moment characterized by emotions, excitement, and pride felt by all of us as we became the new and truly legitimate representatives of the will of the people of South Africa. The election of our president, Nelson Mandela, as the first black president and legitimate president, therefore, was indeed a towering historical epoch in the history of our nation and the world. This moment of pride, however, may have also dwarfed and obscured another significant achievement of history that our people also registered on that day. Just a month earlier, before the elections of 1994, the South African Apartheid Parliament had only 2.7% women representation. In an instant, by the time the Chief Justice finished swearing in of members of the first democratic parliament, women representation had shot up to a staggering 28% for both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Not only did we bulge the representation in numbers, but a historical high, we also made a serious statement of intent by electing the first Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly from the onset, and these being women. I believe that it was very important to have started on that high note, setting the bar that is high for ourselves, because even as we were celebrating such a notable and significant achievement, we needed to be conscious that our work had only just begun. As the world celebrated what they called South African miracle, we knew without a doubt that a new struggle had just begun, the struggle to ensure that women should not be locked into a situation of tokenism by numbers within that parliament or anywhere in the structures of governance and institutions in our society for that matter. I recall Umama Ruth Mumpati, one of the notable women leaders of that era, cautioned us as young women were coming into parliament about the immediate dichotomy facing women MPs of that time, and indeed the progressive movement that has just gained power. In her view, while women were making tremendous inroads by gaining national political positions, many women had remained limited by inequities they faced in their home lives and their political lives. At the back of this, therefore, our attention had to quickly shift from just celebrating getting women into parliament to change in the system to accommodate and empower women at all levels. We had to build our own context and interpretation of that achievement and go beyond the simplified notion that the ascendance of women into political positions and leadership will automatically and by itself improve women's lives, status, and opportunities. Program Director, that determination on the part of the leadership of women then, was a clear intent that the gains made should be defended and deepened. It is the reason why we are here now, engaging the very essence of the establishment of the network of Commonwealth women's parliamentarians. This is because of the immediate recognition that our struggle had to go beyond just the targeting of numbers in representation, and that it should translate into our ability to use this presence of women in institutions of governance to ensure that issues of women in general are placed firmly on the agenda and are advanced within all governance institutions. So why do we fight for representation? The question, in fact, should be, why should we have to? Honorable members, ladies and gentlemen who are on this platform, patriarchy as a social construct has always informed every aspect of how society is organized. It doesn't matter what kind of society or what mode of production, whether it be a domestic democratic society, a free market economy, feudal, socialist, or liberal, the rules and parameters when it comes to gender roles have always been the same. In our case, as early as from the time of the formation of the African National Congress and the organized struggle of our people against colonialism and oppression, women had to fight for their own space and role in the struggle, the very struggle that must define the future society within which we must exist. The formation, therefore, of the Bantu Women's League led by Charlotte Maxeke, whose birth centenary we celebrate this year, was a clear demonstration by women that even if the ANC doesn't allow women membership, women were capable of being involved and lead theirs and their people's struggle for freedom and emancipation. They actually, through their activities, including mobilizing women for the first resistance of the past laws in 1918, had to educate men in the leadership of the ANC that women were capable and no revolution would succeed if women are not part of and in the forefront of such a revolution. Women were finally able to take up membership of the African National Congress, as you would know, only in 1943. But their involvement in struggle went back years and decades into the earlier society. This is why the absence of women in the governance and policy making of countries is wrong. As shown during the days of the Bantu Women's League, structures that do not have adequate representation and involvement of women cannot be seen as capable of championing women issues, neither can they claim legitimacy as true representatives of our society. The first demonstration of commitment to building a gender equal society is to ensure true representation and involvement of women, and together chart the course for advancement together with them. Simply put, political representation makes women's voices about all aspects of their lives and the society they live in to be heard. That is why we fight for representation. Firstly, because women are indeed part of this society. They shouldn't have to be allowed in or accommodated. Those are some of the terms you hear by someone in order to be part of the development of such a society. Nothing has to be given to women. Secondly, this is because women's issues have to be placed on the agenda of such institutions. So we decide what we want. So it's not about accommodating us. It's not about tolerating us. It is about who we are, what we are able to put on the table, and that which determines the position of women decided by us. So that is what for us constituted the new struggle after we managed to win the battle for significant representation of women after 1994. So where are we now? South Africa stands proud of its achievement in the area of representation and participation of women, having come from a baseline of 2.7% representation before 1994. South Africa's parliament now boasts 44.5% women representation, currently in the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces. Representation in provincial legislatures follows a similar pattern. And at the last assessment, South Africa had reached 50% women representation in the executive, which is now in cabinet. In the National Assembly, we recently increased to 6 the number of women to have held the position of Speaker of the House, whilst both houses are currently led by women parliamentarians. So, I am the 4th Speaker of Parliament in an 5th Speaker of Parliament in the 6th administration of our government. Last week, during our sitting here at home in the National Women's Parliament, we noted the outstanding work done by Parliament in reviewing the country's Women's Charter, having monitored its implementation and extent of impact since 1994. The review, which followed a process of public participation and consultations, recognizes the amount of progress that our country has made in advancing women's empowerment over the past decades and a half, but notes the reality that remains, which is women continue to bear the brunt of high levels of inequality. Economic exclusion, unemployment, gender-based violence, and femicide. We also had an opportunity to receive feedback and reports from all 3 spheres of government about the progress they are making in implementing the provisions of the Charter. At best, the implementation is uneven due to lack of strong coordinating, monitoring, and accountability mechanisms. At worst, it has not been encouraging in terms of real impact on the ground. During the discussions, we all called for a move beyond talk shops and to set ourselves targets that can be monitored for implementation and impact. We observed that placing moving targets on imperatives such as eradication of gender-based violence and femicide can no longer be tolerated. We shouldn't be just looking at percentage reduction in the state, but its total eradication, using the institutional capacity and societal engagement mechanisms at our disposal. We recognized the value of a number of programs and awareness building around GBV, especially amongst boys and men, as encouraging. We need programs that go into the homes and schools to educate our young children from an early age about this scourge that we have now categorized as a pandemic. Media and role models programs should be well coordinated and structural capacity for the enforcement of our laws further strengthened. We need a national barometer to hold the implementers and stakeholders accountable on progress and impact. Of course, honorable members, the barometers should also be broadened to monitor all matters of violence, including violence against the LGBTQI community. Program Director, the UN Women reports that 60% of women in our region of SADC have lost jobs and income since the advent of the second pandemic women are currently contending with, and that is COVID-19 pandemic. Any disruption that impacts or disrupts economies, including this pandemic, exposes the socio-economic fault lines of these economies, especially when it comes to gender inequality. It was therefore to be expected that the section of our society that will bear the biggest brunt of this pandemic would be women. The pandemic and its impact have also started reversing the gains the world has made in women's empowerment over the past 22 years, having been the period during which much of the gains in women's empowerment were made in South Africa. Frankly, we don't have another 22 years to give to reclaim these gains. Our outlook of the struggle for women's empowerment should now look forward the opportunities that lie ahead as a result of the disruptive factors that are reshaping our economies. We are fortunate that owing to the advances and progress we have made through empowering policies and legislation, the future of women's empowerment and the struggle against patriarchy will no longer be the same. Disruptions such as COVID-19 pandemic, the shifting of global economies, influence, as well as the traction of a new industrial revolution, comes at a time when women are at a better place to take advantage of the new opportunities. The fact that, at least for the younger generation, education and access to technology has been rolled out in conditions of gendered approach means that the current generation of women will have less obstacles in leveraging the growth of the fourth industrial revolution and even leading it. The death and obsolete rendering of traditional industries designed around the construct of patriarchy almost wipes the slate clean for the race to the top for boys and girls going forward. This is, however, an opportunity we must both recognize and seize. That should be the future consideration for how this network of parliamentarians should view the incoming role of its members in supporting the enabling environment through legislatures going forward. The more we utilize the spaces we've created through law and policy, we create entry points for women. The sooner we change the landscape for thought leadership, women-led innovation, and revolutionary reconstructing of our economies, the sooner the better. This is how our forebears, the Charlotte Maxekes, utilize the small spaces, empowering women to go out and study, empower themselves to revolutionize society, and fight for expanding and reimagining the role of women in society. I want to urge this forum, as we close Women's Month, at chapter level, branch and regional level of the common women's parliamentarians, to adopt the notion of teaching every young woman the mantra, and I quote now, I want to be like Charlotte. I want to be like Charlotte, which means to be fearless and not accept the limitations imposed on them by social constructs, to want to be the first like Charlotte, to want to push and destroy boundaries. I believe that with the many gains we have made through the past 27 years, not only can we ensure that women survive the two prevailing pandemics, the twin evils of COVID-19 and gender-based violence and femicide, but that they can lead society in shaping and reimagined economies that must emerge beyond. Makosikazi, I know your abilities. I've seen what your determination and combined effort can achieve. I've seen it in Charlotte Maxekes, Betha Klowa, in Lillian Ngoyi, Gertrude Shope, in Ray Alexander and Frin Chinwala, in Winnie Mandela, Adelaide Tambo, Sophie de Bruyn, in Baleka Mbete, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, in Batabile Dlamini, in Mavivi Myakayaka Manzini, in Angie Mutsecha, in Phumzile Mlambo Ncuka, in Joyce Khwadi, in Nontembeko Boys, in Vuyiswa Tulelo, Phemi Majodina, Nonceba Mhlauli, Nompendulo Mkhatshwa, and the many in the current generation who continue to show us that it can be done. it can be done. With these generations working hand in hand, we dare not fail. Women, rise, seize the opportunity aggressively and lead this nation. I wish Program Director, Speaker of the KwaZulu National Legislature, I wish your deliberations of this session well. And I do once more thank you for inviting me. Thank you, honorable members. Malibongwe. Allow me, as I say, Malibongwe, to say this to you, that O.R. Tambo had this to say about the role of women. And I want to quote. He says, women have a duty to liberate us men from antique concepts and attitudes about the place and role of women in society and in the development and direction of our revolutionary struggle, close quote. So I just want you, as you continue in your deliberations and even in your question and answer, I want you to go back to what OR had to say to us women, that as we liberate ourselves, we are also liberating our men, we are also liberating society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Nosiviwe. We are truly humbled. It truly is an honor to have heard you grace our program. As we indicated that we literally told you, invited you to speak at a very short notice, and you really upped the tempo. We are truly, truly, truly grateful, Somlom, with Parliament, Lakit. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, we will now take briefly, but just before we continue, I just want to indicate to everyone that is connected that the presentations will be sent as per the request that we keep on receiving. So indeed, you are going to receive the presentations that were presented by our various speakers, including the speech by Umam Nosiviwe. We will now take questions if there are any, comments if there are any, from those who are connected. And I must indicate that I've not received anything from those who have joined us online. Do we have any, where there's nothing? All right. Thank you very much. I've not seen any hands for now, so we can then move with our program. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for keeping you this late. I know it's been a very long, but I think you can agree with me if I say it's been a long but fruitful day. The various speakers that have given us the presentations, the knowledge that was impacted to us in this webinar is truly appreciated. We'd like to really, really appreciate our panel for giving us ukudla kwendlebe, for ensuring that you anibina umona on the knowledge that you have acquired across impilo eseniphilile. We truly, truly, truly do appreciate that. Sibonga kakhulu ku Somlomo weShamthetho saKwaZulu-Natal for giving us this opportunity. Sibonge kakhulu, Ma'am Nosiviwe. We know you've dropped everything to be with us today. We are truly humbled. All our guests who were part of this webinar, who joined us, those who watched on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, we are truly humbled. We'd like to appreciate Umama Ugimbiza Ngomanaiduge, the Secretary of the Legislature, and the entire team for ensuring that we have a successful program today. Mam Celiwe Madlopa, we really truly appreciate your presence. All members of various legislatures across the country, we appreciate the presence of the chairperson of CWP International, Madam Chandana Khan, who joined us from London. We truly do appreciate your presence. We are committing, Honorable Speaker Oguti, this is the first of an ongoing series of educational platforms that we will be having a CWP. I know Uguti, abanye bebesibuza ukuthi why did we not at least have a hybrid session, but obviously when we plan going forward, we will try and ensure Uguti we move with the times. But for now, we must really appreciate everyone that took time to ensure Uguti Nyaslandela on this webinar. Our technical team, ngaba kwenzekanga ngaphandle kwenu. As we always say, Uguti, the Legislature of KwaZulu-Natal has amongst the best of IT specialists, and we truly, truly, truly do value you. So siyabonga kakhulu. The executive leadership of the legislature, siyabonga for giving us this opportunity. The state leadership, siyabonga kakhulu for giving us this opportunity. We saw the leader of government business and other members of the executive in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Siyabonga, siyabonga, siyabonga. As we said before, all our panelists, ngesisanibala ngokulandelana kwenu, sibonga kakhulu. We have come to the end of this webinar, and we are hoping ukuthi it has been an informative session. It has, I'm sure, like all of us, especially I can speak for myself and say, how I entered this webinar is not how I leave it. I am better off than I was when I joined. Usomlomo ke washo ukuthi when she was quoting earlier on Evula speech sakhe, when she said on quoting Umam Charlotte Maxeke ukuthi this work is not for yourselves. Kill the spirit of selves and do not live above your people, but live with them. And if you can rise, bring someone with you. So nathi sithi ke bona bonke abakhona abasifazane in the main, let's ensure ukuthi when we rise to the top, we do not rise only on our own, but we bring someone else with us. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of our program. Thank you very much for honoring the invite. The session stands adjourned. Thank you so much.
Alibongwe.
Thank you, Speaker. Siyabonga Vuvu, enkosi sisi, enkosi kakhulu. Siyabonga sisi Nte. Siyabonga. That was a great session.